Victoria walked into the courtroom like the castle already belonged to her. Not walked, glided. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with the rhythm of someone who had never been told no. She wore a tailored ivory coat over charcoal silk, the kind of quiet wealth that makes judges pause before speaking. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. And when her eyes swept across the room and landed on me, there was no grief in them. No sadness for the grandfather we had both lost 3 weeks ago. Just calculation. Cold, patient calculation. I sat alone at the respondents' table. No family behind me, no expensive lawyer beside me. Just a folder of documents I had not opened yet, and the steady drumbeat of my own heart reminding me that I was still alive, still breathing, still here. Behind Victoria, my stepfather Gerald and his wife Diane settled into the gallery like they had reserved seats at a theater. They sat perfectly aligned, perfectly synchronized, like they had rehearsed their posture in the mirror that morning. Gerald's jaw was set in that expression I knew too well. The one that said this was business, and I was the obstacle. They did not know I had been waiting for this moment for 3 years. They did not know that everything they were about to do had already been anticipated, and they certainly did not know about the man who would walk through that door in exactly 11 minutes. The bailiff called the case number, and Judge Harrison Cole entered from his chambers. He was mid-60s, wire-rimmed glasses, the expression of a man who had seen too many families destroy themselves over money. He settled into his chair, reviewed the case file without looking up, and I watched Victoria's lawyer rise with the confidence of someone who believed he had already won. Raymond Schultz was everything Gerald's money could buy: tailored suit, silver cufflinks, a leather folder thin enough to suggest he did not need much evidence. He knew he was going to win. Everyone in this room knew it. Everyone except me. "Your Honor," Schultz began, his voice smooth as polished stone, "we are filing for emergency transfer of the Pembroke estate, specifically the castle and all associated properties." He paused, letting the words settle. "To my client, Victoria Hale, effective immediately." He slid the motion across the table like a blade. The paper made a soft sound against the wood, but it might as well have been a gunshot. Victoria did not look at me. She did not need to. Her chin lifted slightly, her hands folded in her lap. She looked like a woman accepting an award she already knew she had won. Behind her, Gerald and Diane nodded in unison. A small movement, barely perceptible, but I caught it. They had practiced that. I was certain of it. The petition continued through Schultz's measured voice. "The respondent has demonstrated an inability to manage properties of this scale. She has no experience in estate management. She has isolated the deceased from family members during his final years." He paused again, glancing at me with something that looked almost like pity. "My client is the responsible party. The estate needs protection, immediately, responsible." That word had always been a weapon in this family. It meant give us control and stop asking questions. It meant you are not one of us. It meant sit down and disappear. Victoria finally looked at me then, not with hatred, not with triumph, with the kind of expression you give an insect before you crush it beneath your heel. Like I was not worth the energy of real emotion. Like my existence was merely an inconvenience to be resolved. I filed that look away. I would remember it later, when everything changed. Judge Cole finished reviewing the initial documents and removed his glasses. He cleaned them slowly, a habit that gave him time to think. Then he turned to me. "Ms. Pembroke," he said, his voice flat and neutral, "this petition requests full authority over your grandfather's estate. It alleges you are unfit to participate in its management and may interfere with proper administration." He paused. The courtroom held its breath. "Do you object?" Victoria's lips twitched, almost a smile. She was waiting for me to crumble, to cry, to beg. Raymond Schultz already had his rebuttal prepared. I could see it in the way he shifted his weight, ready to pounce on whatever desperate defense I might offer. I did not stand immediately. I took one breath, then another. When I spoke, my voice did not shake. "Yes, Your Honor, I object." Schultz smiled, faint, patronizing, the smile of a man humoring a child who did not understand the game being played. "On what grounds?" he asked. I did not give him an argument. Not yet. I would like to wait for the last person to arrive. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Judge Cole blinked once, twice. "The last person?" he repeated. Victoria laughed. Short, sharp, humorless. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "There is no one else." Gerald muttered something from the gallery, just loud enough for me to hear. She always does this. Always making scenes. Diane sighed softly, the sound of a woman suffering through someone else's immaturity. I kept my eyes on the judge. I did not look at my family. They were not my family. They had not been for a very long time. Judge Cole studied me for a moment. He had seen desperate defendants before. People who delayed because they had nothing. People who grasped at any straw to postpone the inevitable. But something in my expression made him pause. I was not desperate. I was waiting. "How long?" he asked. "Minutes, Your Honor, not hours." Raymond Schultz stood quickly. Too quickly. "Your Honor, this is clearly a delay tactic. My client has businesses to run. We cannot accommodate theatrical performances designed to waste the court's time." Judge Cole raised his hand. Schultz stopped mid-sentence, his mouth still open. "I will allow a brief delay," the judge said. His eyes stayed on me. "But if this is a tactic, Ms. Pembroke, it will not reflect well on your position." "It is not a tactic, Your Honor. I simply want the full record to be present before you make any decisions," Victoria whispered urgently to Schultz. I could not hear the words, but I could read the tension in her shoulders. She did not know who I was waiting for. She did not know anything, that was the point. The minutes stretched. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to count heartbeats. The clerk checked his watch. A bailiff shifted his weight. Someone in the gallery coughed. Gerald's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and I watched his face change. Not dramatically, just a flicker, a tightening around his eyes. He showed the screen to Diane. She went pale. Something was happening, something they had not expected. I filed that away too. Another piece of the puzzle. Victoria started to speak again, her patience finally cracking, but before she could form the words, the courtroom doors opened. Not dramatically. No theatrical swing, just a clean, controlled push. The kind of movement made by someone who did not need to announce themselves. Someone with purpose. A man stepped inside. Mid-50s, silver temples, face completely expressionless. He wore a black suit so plain it looked like a uniform. No flashy tie, no expensive watch, just dark fabric and perfect posture. He carried a single envelope. Manila, sealed. He did not look at Gerald. He did not acknowledge Victoria. He did not even glance at the judge. He walked straight to the clerk's desk, every step measured, every movement precise. The courtroom went silent. Even Victoria stopped breathing. The man held up the envelope. The seal caught the fluorescent light. "Ms. Pembroke," he said. "Just my surname. Not Alexandra, not the respondent." Like he was confirming something he already knew. Then he turned to the clerk. "This is for the court. From the trustee." Judge Cole reached for the envelope slowly, like it might be something dangerous. Like the paper itself carried weight beyond its contents. He read the return address. His lips moved before he could stop them. And then he whispered something that made Victoria's perfect composure crack for the first time since she had walked through those doors. "That," he said quietly, "cannot be possible." I sat perfectly still at the respondent's table, alone, unrepresented, apparently helpless. But for the first time since this hearing began, I allowed myself to breathe. Grandfather always said the best revenge is not loud. It is patient. It is documented. And it arrives exactly when your enemies think they have already won. The judge held the envelope like it might detonate. His fingers paused on the seal for 3 full seconds before he tore it open. No flourish, just a clean rip that echoed through the silent courtroom. Every eye in the room tracked his movements as he pulled out a thick document, cream-colored paper, with an embossed seal in the corner. The man in the black suit remained standing near the clerk's desk. He had not moved since delivering the envelope, had not shifted his weight, had not looked at anyone except me. "Jonathan Crane," he said, his voice flat and professional. "Senior Trust Administrator, Hawthorne Trust Company." He produced a business card and slid it to the clerk without looking. The card made a soft sound against the wooden surface, but in the silence of that courtroom, it might as well have been thunder. I watched Judge Cole's face when he heard the name Hawthorne Trust Company. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, respect, perhaps even surprise. Hawthorne was not just a trust company. It was the trust company. Old money, old reputation. The kind of institution that did not take clients. It accepted them. And only after extensive vetting. Whatever my grandfather had left behind, it was significant enough for the most conservative trust institution in the Northeast to take personal interest. Victoria leaned toward Raymond Schultz. Her whisper was sharp, urgent, but I could not make out the words. Schultz shook his head slightly. He did not know what was happening either. For the first time since she had walked into this courtroom, Victoria's perfect posture faltered. Just a millimeter. But I noticed. Judge Cole examined the document in his hands. His eyes moved across the first page, then stopped. He removed his glasses, cleaned them, put them back on, read again. His jaw tightened. "This is a certificate of trust," he announced, his voice carrying a new weight. "Dated 7 years ago. 7 years. I did the math in my head. I had been 21. Just finished my junior year of college. That was the summer my grandfather first showed me the secret room. The summer he started preparing for a war he knew would come. The judge continued reading aloud. It states that the property known as Pembroke Castle, along with associated lands and structures, was transferred into an irrevocable trust. He paused, looked up at Victoria's table. The Pembroke Family Preservation Trust. The words hung in the air like a verdict. "According to this document," Judge Cole said slowly, "the castle is not part of the probate estate. It cannot be transferred, sold, or encumbered without trustee approval." He checked the document again, as if confirming what he had read. "And the trustee is Hawthorne Trust Company." Raymond Schultz rose to his feet, too quickly. The confidence that had carried him through the morning was cracking at the edges. "Your Honor, even if there is a trust, probate court still has jurisdiction over the general estate and can determine whether the trust was properly executed." Judge Cole raised his hand. The gesture was small, but Schultz stopped mid-sentence like he had walked into a wall. "Counsel," Judge Cole said, his voice cold, "your motion requested ownership of the castle, effective immediately." He tapped the document once, twice. "This certificate states, in plain language, that the castle was never part of the decedent's probate estate. It was transferred into trust 7 years before his death." The mathematical reality settled over the courtroom. Victoria's petition was asking for something that did not exist in probate. The castle belonged to the trust. The trust was controlled by Hawthorne. Victoria had no claim to make. I kept my face neutral. Years of practice in this family had taught me that much, but inside something loosened. A knot I had carried since the day my grandfather died. He had told me to trust the process, and the process was working. Mr. Crane spoke again, his voice unchanged. "If the court permits, I can clarify the trust structure." Judge Cole nodded. He wanted to understand this. Perhaps he needed to understand it. Mr. Crane remained standing, hands clasped, posture perfect. Edward Pembroke established the Pembroke Family Preservation Trust in consultation with independent legal counsel. The trust holds the castle, the surrounding 47 acres, and several accounts designated for property maintenance. He paused briefly. The trust is irrevocable. It cannot be modified or terminated by any party, including beneficiaries. Schultz opened his mouth to object. Judge Cole silenced him with a look. The trust names one primary beneficiary, Mr. Crane continued. He paused. Not for drama, for precision. Alexandra Pembroke. Victoria went still. Completely, terrifyingly still, like a predator recalculating after prey escaped the first strike. Her hands, which had been folded elegantly in her lap, tightened into fists. The beneficiary receives full use and occupation rights upon the grantor's death, Mr. Crane explained. She receives full ownership transfer at age 35, provided she has maintained the property according to trust guidelines. Until then, the trustee manages all legal and financial matters related to the estate. Gerald could not contain himself any longer. He stood from the gallery, his chair scraping against the floor with an ugly sound. This is forgery. His voice cracked with something between rage and disbelief. That old man was senile. He did not know what he was signing. Judge Cole's gaze turned cold. The temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Mr. Hale," the judge said, his voice like ice, "you will sit down. You will not speak unless addressed. And if you interrupt these proceedings again, I will have you removed and held in contempt." Gerald's face turned red. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Diane grabbed his arm. Not in comfort, in warning. He sat down slowly, like a man forcing himself to swallow poison. The moment passed, but the damage was done. Gerald had shown the court exactly who he was, exactly how much control he had lost. Victoria recalibrated. I could almost see the gears turning behind her eyes. The direct approach had failed. The emergency petition was dead. She needed a new strategy. She leaned toward Schultz and whispered something. He nodded slightly. They had adapted before. They would adapt again. "Your Honor," Schultz said, rising with renewed composure, "may I have a moment to confer with my client?" Judge Cole granted it. 2 minutes. Victoria and Schultz huddled together, their whispers sharp and urgent. I watched Victoria's hands. They were shaking slightly. Not from grief, from anger, from the realization that her easy victory had just evaporated. When Schultz stood again, his strategy had shifted. The smooth confidence was back, but it had a harder edge now. Desperation wearing a polite mask. "Your Honor, we acknowledge the existence of this trust document. However, we have serious concerns about its validity." The accusation took shape slowly, deliberately. Edward Pembroke was elderly when this trust was created. He was increasingly isolated from his family in his final years, and he was under the significant influence of one person. Schultz turned, pointed at me, his granddaughter. Victoria stood without waiting for permission. Her voice trembled with manufactured emotion. The tears she had been saving finally made their appearance. "Alexandra controlled everything, Your Honor. Who visited grandfather, what he ate, what he signed. She manipulated a vulnerable old man for her own benefit." Her eyes glistened. Finally, the mascara smeared. Perfect timing. Diane added her voice from the gallery, her tone dripping with rehearsed sorrow. "We tried to visit. She always had excuses. He is resting. He is not feeling well. He does not want visitors. She kept us away, on purpose." Gerald stayed silent this time, but his jaw was tight, his eyes burning with resentment he could barely contain. The accusation crystallized in the air. Undue influence, elder isolation, possible financial exploitation. They were not fighting the trust anymore. They were fighting me, my character, my relationship with my grandfather. I had known this would come. My grandfather had warned me. "They will attack you when they cannot attack the documents," he had said once, sitting in his study while rain streaked the windows. "Let them. The documents will answer." I trusted him in life. I trusted him now. Judge Cole processed the accusations without visible reaction. He had seen families destroy each other in his courtroom before. Accusations of manipulation were common, Proof was rare. "Counsel," he said to Schultz, "you are making serious allegations. Undue influence, elder abuse, financial exploitation. These are not merely civil claims. These are potential criminal matters." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Do you have evidence? Or just accusations?" Schultz's answer was careful, calculated. "We have testimony, Your Honor. Family members who witnessed the isolation. We have concerns that warrant investigation. We are asking the court to pause any trust distributions until these matters can be examined." The trap was elegant. If the judge agreed to investigate, Victoria bought time. Time to find evidence. Time to pressure me. Time to make the trust seem tainted. I felt the room turning against me. Not dramatically, but subtly. The clerk's expression had shifted. The bailiff stood a little straighter. Even the judge's neutrality had hardened into something that looked almost like suspicion. Victoria caught my eye from across the aisle. Her expression had changed. The condescension was gone. The performance of grief was gone. What remained was something raw and honest for the first time all day. Hatred. Pure and unfiltered. Like I had just taken something she believed was already hers, and she would make me pay for it. Mr. Crane had remained silent through all the accusations. He stood exactly where he had been standing, his expression unchanged. He had heard this before. Families always attacked when they lost. Judge Cole turned to him. "Mr. Crane, these are serious allegations against your trust's grantor. Does Hawthorne Trust have any response?" Mr. Crane's voice remained perfectly level. "Yes, Your Honor. I have additional documentation that addresses these exact concerns." He reached into his jacket and produced another envelope, smaller than the first. Same cream-colored paper, same embossed seal, but this one had a handwritten notation on the front. Judge Cole received it with visible caution. He read the notation aloud, and his voice carried a new quality, something between disbelief and respect, to be presented if my competency or my granddaughter's integrity is questioned. He looked up at Mr. Crane. "He wrote this himself?" Mr. Crane nodded. "Edward Pembroke prepared multiple contingency documents. This one was sealed 7 years ago, on the same day as the trust. He gave specific instructions for when it should be opened." A pause. Deliberate. Today's accusations meet those criteria. Victoria's composure cracked further. She grabbed Schultz's arm and whispered urgently. He shook his head. He did not know what was coming either. Gerald and Diane exchanged glances. Something passed between them. Fear, recognition. They knew Edward Pembroke had been meticulous. They knew he planned ahead. If he had prepared for this, he had prepared thoroughly. Judge Cole broke the seal carefully. He unfolded the document inside. His eyes scanned the first paragraph, and then he stopped reading. He looked up, first at Victoria, then at Gerald, then at Diane. When he spoke, his voice carried something new, not just authority, warning. "I think," he said slowly, "you should all hear what Edward Pembroke had to say about exactly this situation." The courtroom went silent. Not the silence of boredom or routine. The silence of people who suddenly realized they were standing at the edge of something they could not control. My grandfather was dead. He had been dead for 3 weeks. But in that moment, sitting in that Hartford courtroom, I felt his presence more strongly than I had since the day he passed. The dead cannot speak, but they can write. And my grandfather had written everything down. Judge Cole held the document like it was evidence in a murder trial. And in a way it was. A murder of reputation that my grandfather had seen coming 7 years before it happened. The courtroom had gone completely silent. Even the clerk had stopped typing. Victoria sat rigid in her chair, her hands gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles had turned white. Gerald and Diane had gone pale in the gallery, the color of people who suddenly realized they had walked into a trap they could not escape. The document in the judge's hands was 2 pages, handwritten. My grandfather's distinctive script filled every line. Precise, elegant, the penmanship of a man who believed words should be permanent. I recognized it instantly. I had seen that handwriting on birthday cards, on notes left in my college dorm, on the margins of books he wanted me to read. Judge Cole examined the pages in silence. His expression shifted 3 times as he read. First confusion, then understanding, finally something that looked almost like respect. He cleared his throat. "This document is titled Statement of Intent and Anticipation," he announced. "It was prepared by Edward Pembroke and notarized by 3 independent witnesses." He looked up at the courtroom. Mr. Pembroke requested it be read aloud if certain conditions were met. He turned his gaze to Victoria's table. His expression made it clear what he thought of those conditions. "Those conditions have been met." Raymond Schultz half rose from his seat. "Your Honor, we object to the introduction of unverified documents. This is highly irregular and prejudicial to my client's position." Judge Cole cut him off with a look that could have frozen fire. "Counsel," he said, his voice sharp as broken glass, "you spent the last 15 minutes accusing the deceased's granddaughter of manipulation and abuse. You alleged that a vulnerable old man was exploited by someone he trusted." He tapped the document once. "You opened this door. Now you will hear what is on the other side. Sit down." Schultz sat. He had no choice. The judge's authority filled the room like a physical force. Victoria's face had lost all color. She stared at the papers in the judge's hands like they might reach out and strike her. For the first time since she had walked into this courtroom, she looked genuinely afraid. Judge Cole began to read. His voice took on a different quality, measured, respectful. He was not just reading words. He was giving my grandfather a voice from beyond the grave. "I, Edward Pembroke, being of sound mind and clear judgment, write this statement in anticipation of events I hope will never occur, but suspect are inevitable." The words hung in the air. My grandfather's voice, filtered through a stranger, but unmistakably his. If this document is being read, it means someone has accused my granddaughter Alexandra of manipulating me, isolating me, or exploiting my trust. I want to address these accusations directly. Victoria shifted in her seat. The sound was loud in the silence. "I was not manipulated," Judge Cole continued reading. "I was protected." The word landed like a stone dropped into still water. Protected. Not controlled. Not isolated. Protected. In my final years, Alexandra was the only family member who visited without wanting something. She came to read to me, to share meals, to sit in silence when I was too tired to talk. She never once asked about money, property, or inheritance. I felt my eyes sting. I had not cried since the funeral. I would not cry now, not in front of them. But my grandfather's words reached something deep inside me that I had tried to keep buried. Others were not so restrained. Judge Cole paused on that line. "Let it settle." Then continued. "I will not name names in this document as the courts can determine truth. But I will say this. Those who accuse Alexandra of isolation were the same people I chose to distance myself from. I was not isolated. I was selective." Victoria made a small sound, not quite a gasp, something closer to a wounded animal recognizing the trap closing around it. I watched her face as the judge continued reading. The composure was cracking, not dramatically. Victoria was too controlled for that. But there was a tremor in her jaw, a tightening around her eyes. She was hearing her own accusations dismantled by a dead man, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Judge Cole reached a new section. He paused before reading it, took a breath, like he knew the next words would change everything. "If anyone accuses Alexandra of manipulating me, they are projecting their own behavior onto her." The courtroom went still. Even the air seemed to stop moving. "I know exactly who tried to manipulate me. I kept records." Gerald made a sound from the gallery, something between a cough and a choke. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. "I know who asked me to change my will. I kept those letters. I know who pressured me to sell the castle. I recorded those conversations. Victoria's breathing had changed, shallow, fast. Her chest rose and fell rapidly beneath her expensive silk blouse. The judge continued, his voice steady as granite. I have placed additional documentation with my trustee, letters requesting that I disinherit Alexandra, recordings of conversations where family members discussed managing my affairs without my consent, financial records showing unauthorized attempts to access my accounts. Mr. Crane nodded slightly from his position near the clerk's desk. Confirmation. Everything my grandfather described existed. Everything was preserved. Judge Cole turned a page. The paper made a soft rustling sound that seemed impossibly loud. I want to speak directly to Alexandra now, if she is present. The judge looked at me, paused. His expression had softened. Just slightly. Just enough. I nodded. I was ready. Whatever my grandfather had to say, I needed to hear it. Alexandra, if you are hearing this, I am sorry. My throat tightened. Sorry that you have to fight for what should simply be given with love. Sorry that family became a word that meant danger instead of comfort. Sorry that I could not protect you from everything. I did not move, did not blink, did not let them see what those words were doing to me inside. But I want you to know, you were never alone. Every document I created, every record I kept, every precaution I took, it was all for you. Not because you needed protecting from the world, because you deserved someone who would fight for you, even after I was gone. I thought of all the nights I had sat with him, all the conversations about nothing important, all the times I thought I was just keeping him company. He was keeping me safe, building walls around my future, one document at a time. Judge Cole reached the final section. His voice dropped slightly. He wanted every word to land. To those who accused my granddaughter of manipulation, you mistook her kindness for weakness, her patience for passivity, her silence for submission. You were wrong. Victoria flinched. Actually flinched, like the words had physical weight. And if you are hearing these words, you have already begun to pay for that mistake. The silence that followed was heavy enough to drown in. Judge Cole set down the document, removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that had not been there before. I have presided over many estate disputes, he said slowly. I have seen families tear themselves apart over money, property, pride. But I have rarely seen a decedent prepare so thoroughly for the worst of human nature. He turned to Victoria and Schultz. Ms. Hale, your petition alleged that Ms. Pembroke was unfit and manipulative. This document suggests the opposite. It suggests that Mr. Pembroke had full capacity, clear judgment, and specific reasons for his decisions. Victoria opened her mouth. No words came out. Your emergency motion is denied, Judge Cole continued. The trust stands as written. The castle is not part of the probate estate and cannot be transferred by this court. He paused, but the pause felt like a door opening rather than closing. Additionally, I am concerned about the nature of today's allegations. Accusations of elder abuse are serious. They should not be made lightly. If they were made in bad faith, there will be consequences. Schultz attempted damage control. His voice had lost its polish. Your Honor, my client was genuinely concerned about her grandfather's welfare. She acted out of love and worry for a family member she cared deeply about. Save it, counsel. Judge Cole's patience was exhausted. His words came out sharp and final. I will be reviewing the record of today's proceedings carefully, and I suggest your client consider her next steps very carefully as well. Mr. Crane spoke for the first time since delivering the documents. His voice remained perfectly level, perfectly calm. Your Honor, if I may address one additional matter. Judge Cole nodded. The trust contains a no-contest clause. The words fell like a guillotine. Any beneficiary who challenges the trust's validity through litigation forfeits their distribution. Ms. Hale was named as a secondary beneficiary, 15% of liquid assets. He paused. Let the math settle. Today's petition may have triggered that clause. Victoria stood abruptly. Her chair scraped against the floor with an ugly sound. That is not possible. She was almost shouting. I did not know about any clause. I was told the trust was invalid. I was told. Schultz grabbed her arm. His whisper was urgent. Sit down. Now. She did not sit. She stared at Mr. Crane with something beyond anger. Beyond fear. The realization was spreading across her face like a stain. She had not just lost the castle. She may have lost everything her grandfather had left her. By trying to take my inheritance, she had destroyed her own. Judge Cole raised his hand. We are in recess. 30 minutes. His gaze moved across the courtroom, landed on Victoria, then Gerald, then Diane. When we return, I expect all parties to have considered their positions carefully, very carefully. He stood. The gavel fell. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a period at the end of a sentence. People began to rise. Movement filled the room, but I stayed seated, processing, breathing, trying to understand what had just happened. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind. You were never alone. Every document I created, every record I kept, every precaution I took, it was all for you. He had known. He had known exactly what they would do, and he had prepared for it. 7 years of preparation for a single day in court. The dead cannot speak, but they can write, and my grandfather had written a fortress around me. I watched Gerald move toward the side door. His phone was pressed to his ear. His voice was low, but his words carried. The acoustics of the courtroom betrayed him. We need to move to Plan B. Now, before she finds out about the rest. Plan B, which meant there had been a Plan A, a plan that had just failed spectacularly. And if there was a Plan B, there might be a Plan C, a Plan D, an entire alphabet of schemes I knew nothing about. Gerald disappeared through the side door. Diane followed him. Victoria remained at the defense table, staring at nothing, her perfect world crumbling around her. What rest? What else was there to find out? What other secrets had they been keeping? I did not know the answers. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was not over. The battle for the castle had just begun. And whatever Gerald was planning, whatever he was trying to hide, my grandfather had probably anticipated that too. He had spent 20 years building defenses I was only beginning to understand. And somewhere in those defenses lay the truth about everything. I just had to find it before they did. The bailiff called for recess, but I did not move. I sat at that table and let the courtroom empty around me, Gerald's words echoing in my skull. Plan B, now, before she finds out about the rest. What rest? What else had they been hiding? What other secrets lay buried beneath 20 years of silence? The documents on the judge's bench caught the fluorescent light. My grandfather's handwriting. That precise, elegant script I had known my entire life. The same handwriting I had first truly understood 7 years ago, the summer everything changed. The courtroom faded around me. The fluorescent light softened into afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows. The legal papers became a different document, older, yellowed at the edges. I was no longer 28, sitting in a Hartford courthouse. I was 21, standing in my grandfather's study at Pembroke Castle. That was the summer I learned that family could be a knife, and that the only person holding a shield was an 80-year-old man who had already been fighting longer than I had been alive. The castle stood as it always had, stone walls covered in green ivy, towers reaching toward a June sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. It was not grand in the European sense. It was American old money, built in 1892 by my great-great-grandfather, a man who made his fortune in railroads and wanted something permanent to show for it. The walls had witnessed 4 generations of Pembrokes, births, deaths, marriages, betrayals. It was the only place that had ever felt like home. I had just finished my junior year of college. Elementary education. I wanted to teach. I wanted to spend my life surrounded by children who still believed the world was good, who still trusted the adults around them. Maybe I wanted to protect that innocence because I had lost my own so young. I lived in a small apartment near campus during the school year, worked part-time at a bookstore, counted every dollar twice. Summer break meant 2 months at the castle with my grandfather, 2 months of peace before returning to the real world. Gerald and Diane lived in a modern mansion in Greenwich, all glass and sharp angles and furniture you were afraid to sit on. Victoria had her own penthouse in Manhattan, paid for by her father, decorated in the same cold, minimalist style. They visited the castle twice a year, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Both visits lasted exactly 48 hours. Both visits ended with arguments about money. I had been coming to the castle every summer since I was 12. Since my mother died, since Gerald made it clear, in 1,000 small ways, that I was not really his daughter, since Victoria made it clear in 1,000 smaller ways that I was not really her sister. My grandfather was the only family I had left, the only one who wanted me for who I was, not for what I might inherit. At 81, Edward Pembroke still had a mind sharp enough to cut glass. His body was failing, slowly but steadily. He walked with a cane now but refused a wheelchair. He still read 3 newspapers every morning, still wrote letters by hand, still remembered everything. On my 3rd day that summer, I found him in his study at dawn. He was not reading or writing. He was sitting in the dark, holding a photograph I had never seen. When he heard my footsteps, he put it away quickly. Too quickly. Like a child caught with something forbidden. Some memories, he said, his voice rough with something I did not recognize, are better kept in drawers. I did not ask what the photograph showed. I wish I had. I wish I had pushed. But I was 21, and I still believed that adults kept secrets for good reasons. I still believed that the truth would come out when it was ready. I was wrong about so many things that summer. 1 week into my visit, my grandfather asked me to stay after dinner. We had fallen into our usual routine. Breakfast together, separate afternoons, dinner and conversation by the fire. But that night, something in his expression made me pause. "There is something I need to tell you," he said. "Something I should have told you years ago." We were in his study, the same room where I would later sit while a judge read his words aloud, the same leather chairs, the same old lamp casting warm shadows across the walls, the same smell of books and pipe tobacco that meant safety to me. "Your stepfather is not a good man, Alexandra." The words landed hard, not because they were surprising, because they were finally being spoken aloud. "I know you sense it," my grandfather continued. "You have always been perceptive. But you do not know the extent of it." He told me the history I had never been allowed to know. Gerald Hale had been a business associate of my father. They had co-founded a real estate development company when they were both young and ambitious. My father was the visionary. Gerald was the salesman. Together, they built something successful, something that should have lasted. But they were never truly partners. "Your father wanted to build things that lasted," my grandfather said. Gerald wanted to flip them for profit. They disagreed constantly in those final years. Gerald wanted to buy out your father. Your father refused. He paused. The firelight flickered across his face, deepening the lines around his eyes. 1 month before your father died, Gerald came to me. He asked me to intervene, to convince Daniel to sell his share. My grandfather's voice dropped. I saw something I had never seen in his eyes before. Guilt, heavy and old and carried for years. I refused. I told Gerald that Daniel's vision was worth more than quick money. He looked at me then, and his next words carved themselves into my memory. 2 weeks later, Gerald came back. He asked about my will. The implication settled over me like a cold fog. Gerald had been planning, even before my father died. He had been looking ahead, calculating, positioning himself. He saw the Pembroke family as an opportunity. The company, the castle, the wealth, all of it. I felt sick. I thought about my mother's funeral. Gerald standing beside her coffin, his hand on my shoulder. I had thought it was comfort. Now I wondered if it had been possession. Staking a claim. How did my father really die? The question came out before I could stop it. The question I had been afraid to ask for 13 years. My grandfather was silent for a long moment. The fire crackled. The old clock on the mantel ticked away seconds that felt like hours. The official report said it was a car accident. Brake failure on a mountain road. His voice was careful, measured. My father, Daniel Pembroke, 34 years old, driving home from a business meeting on a Tuesday afternoon. His car went through a guardrail on Route 7, dead on impact. I was 8 years old. Your father was meticulous about his car, my grandfather continued. He had it serviced every 3 months. The brake failure never made sense to me. I heard what he was not saying. The suspicion that had lived in him for years, gnawing at his peace, poisoning his sleep. I hired a private investigator. The car had already been scrapped. The mechanic who last serviced it had moved away. Every lead turned into a dead end. He opened a drawer in his desk, pulled out a folder thick with papers. I could see tabs dividing sections, dates, names, numbers. I kept looking, he said. For years, I kept looking. He opened the folder. Inside, I saw photographs, phone records, financial statements. A web of evidence that told a story the police had never bothered to investigate. I found things. Not proof. Not yet. But patterns. He spread the documents across the desk. Gerald's debts before the accident. Massive debts. The kind that destroy men. He pointed to a bank statement showing negative balances, overdue notices, collection letters. A large insurance policy on your father that Gerald helped him take out. 6 months before he died, he showed me the policy. $3 million, my father's signature at the bottom. And next to it, as witness and co-beneficiary, Gerald Hale. Phone records showing calls to people I could not identify. Calls made in the week before the accident. Calls that lasted exactly long enough to give instructions. My grandfather closed the folder. I could not prove murder. But I could protect you from the man I suspected of committing it. I stared at the folder, at the years of investigation it represented, at the obsession of a father who had lost his son and refused to accept the official story. Why did you not tell me before? Because you were a child, and then you were a teenager. And then I realized I needed to prepare you, not just tell you. He stood, used his cane to rise. The movement was slow, painful, but determined. Come with me. There is something you need to see. We left the study, walked through corridors I knew by heart. But then we turned where I had never turned before, toward the East Library. My great-great-grandfather built this during Prohibition, my grandfather said as we entered. He was a very cautious man. So am I. He walked to the third bookshelf from the window, reached behind a row of old encyclopedias. I heard a click, and then the entire bookshelf swung inward, revealing a narrow doorway and stone stairs descending into darkness. Only 4 people have ever known about this room. My great-great-grandfather, my father, me, and now you. The stairs were worn smooth by generations of careful feet. The air grew cooler as we descended. At the bottom, a steel door with a keypad glowed faintly in the dim light. The code is your mother's birthday, my grandfather said. Month, day, year, remember it. He entered the numbers. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The room beyond was small, maybe 10 by 12 feet, no windows, climate-controlled. I could feel the cool, dry air on my skin. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, neatly labeled, organized with military precision. In the corner sat a heavy floor safe, old but well-maintained. Everything important is here, my grandfather said. Documents, recordings, photographs, evidence. Things I have collected over 40 years of watching this family. He pulled open one of the filing cabinets. Inside, I saw folders stretching back decades, letters, contracts, financial records, a lifetime of secrets preserved in paper. He pulled out a single letter. The handwriting was Gerald's. I recognized the sharp, impatient slant. He wrote this to me 15 years ago. Read it. The letter was short, polite on the surface, but underneath the formal language, it was a threat. If Edward did not agree to sell the castle, Gerald would ensure the family's interests were protected by other means. The date at the bottom made my blood freeze. 3 weeks before my father's accident. If anything happens to me, my grandfather said, you need to know this room exists. The code to the safe is your mother's birthday. Promise me you will not come here unless you have to. Promise me you will only use what is inside when there is no other choice. I promised. I did not fully understand yet, but I gave him my word. The memory dissolved. The stone walls of the secret room became the wood paneling of the Hartford courtroom. The cool underground air became the stale recycled ventilation of a government building. My grandfather's voice became the bailiff announcing the end of recess. I blinked. People were filing back in. Victoria and Schultz were in whispered conference at their table. But Gerald and Diane were notably absent from their seats in the gallery. A man approached my table. Mid-40s, professional, carrying a leather briefcase. Ms. Pembroke, I am Marcus Webb, your attorney. I stared at him. My attorney. Your grandfather retained me 3 years ago, he explained quickly, in anticipation of exactly this situation. We need to talk, now, before court resumes. He sat beside me. His voice dropped to a whisper. One of my contacts at the courthouse texted me during the recess. Gerald Hale made 3 phone calls from the hallway. He checked his phone. Read the message again. 1 call to a bank, 1 to a lawyer I do not recognize, and 1 to someone at the castle. My blood went cold. The castle. Who would Gerald be calling there? The staff? A contractor? Someone else? There is more, Marcus said, his voice barely audible. My contact recognized the 3rd number. It belongs to a locksmith. He paused. A locksmith who specializes in safes. The secret room. Gerald knew, or suspected, and he was already moving. I had to get to the castle, before he did. I had 11 minutes before court resumed. 11 minutes to process what Marcus had just told me about the locksmith. 11 minutes to decide whether to abandon this hearing and race to the castle, or trust that my grandfather's defenses would hold without me. The secret room contained everything. 40 years of documents. Evidence that could expose Gerald for what he truly was. If he got there first, if he found a way past the locks and codes, decades of my grandfather's work could vanish. Burned, shredded, erased from existence. But leaving now meant abandoning the hearing. It meant giving Victoria exactly what she wanted. An empty chair at the respondents' table. Proof that I could not handle pressure. Ammunition for whatever attack she was planning next. Marcus Webb read my expression. He had been doing this long enough to recognize the calculations happening behind my eyes. You cannot leave, he said quietly. If you walk out, Schultz will argue you have forfeited your defense. The judge will not look kindly on abandonment. But the castle, the room, everything my grandfather built. Marcus placed his hand on the table. Steady, calm. I have already called someone. Mrs. Patterson, the caretaker. She has worked at the castle for 30 years. I reached her during the recess and gave her specific instructions. I stared at him. You know about Mrs. Patterson? Your grandfather briefed me on every detail of his estate, Marcus replied. Every person. Every vulnerability. Every contingency. Mrs. Patterson has been instructed to let no one inside until you return. She knows to call the police if anyone tries to force entry. Do you trust her? I thought about Mrs. Patterson. Gray hair always pinned back. Hands that smelled like lavender and furniture polish. She had been at the castle since before I was born. She had watched my father grow up. She had cried at his funeral, and at my mother's and at my grandfather's. I trust her, I said. Then stay, Marcus replied. Fight this battle first. The castle will wait. The bailiff called the courtroom to order. Judge Cole returned to his bench. Victoria and Schultz were already seated, their whispered conference finished, their strategy presumably adjusted. Gerald and Diane slipped back through the side door just as the bailiff closed the main entrance. Gerald's face was carefully neutral. Too neutral. The mask of a man hiding something. I watched him take his seat. His phone was still in his hand, screen facing down. But I noticed something. A slight tremor in his fingers. Whatever calls he had made, whatever plans he had set in motion, he was not as confident as he wanted to appear. Good. Let him worry. Let him feel hunted for once. Judge Cole settled into his chair and addressed the courtroom. We are back on record, he announced. Before we continue, I want to make clear that this court takes allegations of undue influence very seriously. But I also take seriously the introduction of baseless accusations designed to delay legitimate proceedings. He looked at Schultz. Counsel, I understand you wish to challenge the validity of the trust. You may proceed, but I warn you, stick to facts. Schultz stood with renewed composure. Whatever conversation he had during the recess had restored some of his confidence. The smooth, professional veneer was back in place, though I could see cracks underneath if I looked closely enough. Your Honor, we would like to address the validity of the trust itself. While we acknowledge the existence of the documents presented, we question their legal standing. He began his technical assault. A trust of this magnitude requires specific formalities. Proper witnessing, proper notarization, proper mental capacity assessments. We have reason to believe these requirements were not fully met. The challenges came in rapid succession. First, the witnesses listed on the trust document. Were they truly independent, or were they employees of the grantor, people who depended on him for their livelihoods and could not objectively assess his mental state? Second, the notarization occurred at the castle itself. Was the notary properly licensed in Connecticut at that time? Were all procedural requirements followed? Third, no independent mental capacity evaluation appears in the court record. How can we be certain that an 81-year-old man understood the complex legal implications of what he was signing? The questions were legitimate. Even valid trusts could be invalidated on technical grounds. I had seen it happen. A missing signature. A witness who turned out to be related to a beneficiary. A notary whose license had expired 3 days before the signing. The law was full of trapdoors for the unprepared. Judge Cole turned to Mr. Crane. Can you address these concerns? Mr. Crane rose with the same unhurried calm he had displayed since entering the courtroom. Certainly, Your Honor. He produced another folder from his briefcase. How many documents had my grandfather prepared? How many contingencies had he anticipated? Mr. Pembroke anticipated these exact challenges, Mr. Crane said. Allow me to address each point. He opened the folder. Regarding the witnesses. The 3 individuals who witnessed the trust signing were as follows. James Richardson, Mr. Pembroke's personal attorney for 32 years, a member of the Connecticut Bar with an impeccable record. Dr. Helen Fairfax, professor of estate law at Yale University, who served as an independent legal consultant. And the Honorable Robert Chen, retired Superior Court judge, who witnessed the document as a personal favor to Mr. Pembroke. Schultz's expression flickered. Those were not the names of vulnerable employees. Those were legal heavyweights. Regarding the notary, Mr. Crane continued. Margaret Sullivan has been a licensed notary in Connecticut for 42 years. Her credentials were verified before, during, and after the signing. All procedural requirements were followed to the letter. He turned a page. And regarding mental capacity. All 3 witnesses submitted sworn affidavits confirming Mr. Pembroke's clarity of mind at the time of signing. Additionally, Hawthorne Trust Company requires independent cognitive assessments for all irrevocable trusts above a certain value threshold. He pulled out 3 more documents. Mr. Pembroke underwent evaluation by 2 board-certified psychiatrists and 1 neurologist. Dr. Sarah Chen of Yale New Haven Hospital's psychiatric department found no evidence of cognitive decline. Dr. Michael Torres, a private practice neurologist, documented full mental acuity and exceptional memory for his age. And Dr. Robert Finch, a court-appointed independent evaluator, confirmed that Mr. Pembroke demonstrated complete understanding of his assets, his beneficiaries, and the implications of his decisions. Mr. Crane set the documents on the clerk's desk. He was not just competent, Your Honor, he was exceptionally sharp. Schultz's phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at it just for a second, but his face changed. Something flickered across his features. Surprise, concern, maybe fear. He turned the phone face down quickly, but not before Victoria noticed. She leaned toward him, whispered something urgent. He shook his head slightly. Whatever that message contained, he was not sharing it with his client. Judge Cole observed the exchange but said nothing. His attention returned to the proceedings. Counsel, it appears Mr. Pembroke was quite thorough. Your challenges have been addressed. Do you have any other grounds for contesting this trust? Schultz paused. A long pause. The kind that fills a courtroom with tension. I knew what that pause meant. He was reaching for something, a last resort, a final card he had hoped not to play. He looked at Victoria. She gave the smallest nod. Permission. Whatever was coming next, they had planned it together. Your Honor, Schultz said slowly, if I may. We acknowledge that the technical requirements appear to have been met. However, technical compliance does not preclude the possibility of undue influence. Even the most properly executed documents can be the product of manipulation. He gestured toward his table. We request permission to present additional evidence that bears directly on the question of Ms. Pembroke's relationship with her grandfather. Evidence that was not available to us until recently. Marcus Webb was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The defense has had no opportunity to review any new evidence. We cannot respond to materials we have not seen. Judge Cole raised his hand. Mr. Schultz, what is the nature of this evidence? Video footage, Your Honor. Security camera recordings from inside Pembroke Castle. Footage that shows troubling interactions between Ms. Pembroke and her grandfather in the months before his death. The courtroom stirred. Video evidence carried weight that documents could not match. People believed their eyes. People trusted what they could see. Marcus pressed his objection. Your Honor, this is a clear ambush tactic. Evidence introduced without notice, without time for verification, without any opportunity for the defense to prepare a response. This should be excluded. Judge Cole considered. His expression was difficult to read. Victoria spoke without standing, without waiting for permission. Her voice trembled with practiced emotion. Please, Your Honor, this is about protecting my grandfather's memory. If there is any chance he was being mistreated, do we not owe it to him to know the truth? She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The gesture was perfect, sympathetic, grieving, concerned. I will allow it, Judge Cole said. Marcus started to protest, but the judge cut him off. I will allow it. However, I will also allow the defense adequate time to respond. If this evidence is as significant as you claim, Mr. Schultz, it should withstand scrutiny. A laptop was produced, a projector screen lowered from the ceiling. Schultz connected the device with the efficiency of someone who had prepared this moment carefully. Victoria's hand moved beneath the table. I saw it, just barely. She was texting, her phone hidden below the edge, her eyes on the screen being set up, but her fingers moving. Sending a message to someone, coordinating something. I filed it away. Another piece of the pattern, another thread to follow later. Your Honor, Schultz announced, this is security footage from inside Pembroke Castle, recorded approximately 4 months before Mr. Pembroke's death. The screen flickered to life. I recognized the room immediately. My grandfather's study, the leather chair where he spent most of his days, the window overlooking the east garden, the lamp that cast warm light across everything. In the video, my grandfather sat in that chair. He was holding a document. Frowning at it, his hands were shaking slightly. He looked up at someone standing beside him. The camera angle shifted, and I saw myself. Or rather, I saw someone who looked like me, who moved like me, who wore clothes I owned. The audio crackled to life. "Just sign here, grandfather." My voice, recorded, clear as day. "It is what we discussed." My grandfather's voice came next, wavering with confusion. "I do not remember discussing this. You agreed to it." My voice again, patient but insistent. "Do not you remember?" I watched my grandfather on the screen, the uncertainty in his eyes, the trembling pen in his hand. I suppose I did. His voice was small, defeated. My memory is not what it was. He signed the document. His signature was shaky, uncertain. The person who looked like me took the paper quickly. There, that was not so hard, was it? The video ended. The screen went dark. The silence that followed was suffocating. Judge Cole's expression had changed. Where there had been something like sympathy, there was now doubt. Victoria did not bother hiding her smile anymore. Gerald and Diane exchanged looks of triumph. Marcus Webb's jaw was tight. His legal mind was already working, searching for angles, for weaknesses, for ways to attack what we had just seen. But I sat frozen, because I knew the truth. That never happened. I never stood over my grandfather. I never pushed him to sign anything. I never spoke those words in that tone. The video was a lie wearing my face, a fabrication designed to destroy me. The problem was I could see myself on that screen. I could hear my own voice, and I had no idea how to prove that what everyone had just witnessed was a carefully constructed deception. Judge Cole turned to me. His eyes held a question I did not know how to answer. "Ms. Pembroke," he said slowly, "would you like to explain what we just saw?" I opened my mouth, and for the first time since I had walked into this courtroom, I did not know what to say. The video played again in my mind even after the screen went dark. My face, my voice, my hands guiding my grandfather's pen across a document he did not understand. Except none of it happened. None of it was real. But reality does not matter when a lie wears your skin. The courtroom atmosphere had shifted. I could feel it like a change in air pressure before a storm. Judge Cole's expression had hardened. The clerk was watching me differently now, her pen paused above her notepad. Even the bailiff's posture had changed. More alert, more watchful, like he was guarding a suspect instead of maintaining order. Victoria sat at her table with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had just delivered a killing blow. She did not gloat openly. She was too smart for that. But her shoulders had relaxed, her chin lifted slightly. The tension that had gripped her since Mr. Crane walked through those doors had finally released. Raymond Schultz pressed the advantage before I could find my footing. "Your Honor, this footage speaks for itself. Ms. Pembroke clearly took advantage of her grandfather's diminished mental state. She manipulated him into signing documents he did not understand. This is exactly the kind of undue influence we warned the court about." His voice carried the confident rhythm of a man who believed he had already won. The video had changed everything. Documents could be disputed, testimony could be questioned. But video was different. Video felt true even when it lied. My mind raced through possibilities. When was this supposedly filmed? I remembered every visit to the castle in those final months, every conversation with my grandfather, every moment we shared. I never stood over him. I never pushed him to sign anything. I never spoke those words in that tone. But the video existed. The video looked real, and I had no idea how to prove otherwise. Judge Cole addressed me directly. His voice was flat, careful, the tone of a man reserving judgment but clearly troubled by what he had seen. "Ms. Pembroke, you have heard the question. What is your response to this video?" I forced myself to breathe, to think, to speak without my voice shaking. Your Honor, that video is fabricated. I never stood over my grandfather and forced him to sign anything. I do not know how it was created, but it did not happen. The words sounded weak even to my own ears. Denial without evidence, accusation without proof. Exactly what they expected me to say. Schultz smiled. The polite, patient smile of a man holding all the cards. Of course she denies it, Your Honor. What else would she say? The footage is date-stamped. It comes from the castle's own security system. Is she suggesting her grandfather's security cameras were lying? Marcus Webb was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, we need time to examine this footage. It was introduced without proper notice. We have not had any opportunity to verify its authenticity. My client deserves the chance to respond properly. Judge Cole considered the request. I could see him weighing the options. Fairness demanded time for examination. But the video had planted seeds of doubt that would grow regardless of what happened next. I agree that the timing is irregular, the judge said finally. However, this court cannot ignore potential evidence of elder abuse. He paused. The weight of his words settled over the room. I am calling a 45-minute recess. Mr. Webb, use that time wisely. The gavel fell. People began to move. But I sat frozen at the table, watching my world collapse around me in slow motion. Marcus leaned close. His voice was urgent, but controlled. We need to find a way to challenge this. Technical analysis. Metadata examination. Something that proves the footage was altered. But how? I asked. It looks real. It sounds real. Even I almost believe it. Your grandfather was meticulous, Marcus replied. If that video is fake, there will be evidence. We just need to find it. Movement in the gallery caught my attention. A man I did not recognize was walking toward the exit. Gray hair, rumpled jacket, an observer's badge clipped to his lapel. He looked like any other courtroom spectator. But he was not leaving. He stopped beside a court officer and handed him something small. An envelope, plain white, no markings that I could see. The officer looked at the envelope, looked at the man, then looked at me, and started walking toward our table. The court officer approached Marcus with the envelope extended. This was left for your client, he said simply. Marcus took it cautiously, examining the plain white paper. No name, no return address, just 2 words written on the front in block letters. The truth. Who gave you this? Marcus asked. The officer shrugged. Man in the gallery? He left before I could ask questions. Said it was important. Marcus looked at me. I shook my head. I did not know the gray-haired man. Had never seen him before today. We opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a USB drive, small, black, unremarkable, and a single sheet of paper with typed text. Marcus read the note aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. Metadata does not lie. Frame 1247 to 1389. Audio splice at 047. Original unedited footage exists. They do not know I kept a copy. The implications hit me like a wave. Someone inside the conspiracy was helping us, someone with access to the original footage, someone who knew exactly how the video had been fabricated. We need a laptop, Marcus said. Now. I had mine in my bag. I had brought it to reference documents if needed. We found a private conference room down the hall, away from the courtroom, away from Victoria's watchful eyes. Marcus inserted the USB drive. The screen flickered. A folder appeared. 3 items inside. A folder labeled Analysis, another folder labeled Original, and a video file labeled Compare. Marcus opened the Compare file first. The screen split in 2. On the left, the video Schultz had played in the courtroom. On the right, another version that looked identical at first glance. Watch, Marcus said. Watch the timestamp at the bottom. He pressed play. Both videos ran simultaneously. For the first 46 seconds, they were perfectly synchronized. Same angles, same movements, same everything. Then the 047 mark arrived. The audio wavered. A tiny stutter. A hiccup so brief that you would miss it if you were not looking. But once you saw it, You could not unsee it. Someone had cut and pasted my voice from a different conversation entirely. I remembered that day suddenly, the words that had been spliced into the fake video. "Just sign here, grandfather." I had said those exact words, but the context was completely different. "It was his birthday," I said, my voice hollow with realization. Mrs. Patterson had organized a card for the staff to sign. I was asking him to add his signature to his own birthday card. I said, "Just sign here, grandfather. Mrs. Patterson will love it." They had taken a moment of warmth and twisted it into evidence of abuse. Marcus opened the analysis folder. Inside were detailed breakdowns that someone with technical expertise had prepared. Frame-by-frame comparisons, audio waveform analysis, timestamp inconsistencies. The fabrication exposed itself under examination. The video Schultz had presented was created 6 weeks ago. The metadata embedded in the file told the truth even when the images lied. 3 different source files had been combined. The final product was rendered on a computer, not recorded live by a security camera. Marcus pointed to the visual analysis. "Look at this. Frames 1247 through 1389. That is the section where you appear in the study." He zoomed in on my figure in the fake video. "See the edge artifacts around your body? These are signs of digital compositing. Someone inserted your image into footage where it did not belong. Your shadow falls at a slightly different angle than the furniture. The lighting on your face does not match the lighting in the room." He pulled up another document. "They used security footage from a different day to extract your image. Look at this comparison. This is you walking through the castle hallway 2 months earlier. Different day, different clothes, different context, but they extracted your figure, resized it, adjusted the lighting, and inserted it into the study footage." The sophistication of the deception was staggering. Someone had spent serious time and money creating this lie. This was not a rushed job. This was planned, deliberate, professional. Marcus found another document in the folder, source identification. Someone had traced the editing software's license. The program used to create the fake video was Adobe Premiere Pro. Not unusual by itself, but the license was registered to a specific company, Hale Media Solutions. I did not recognize the name immediately, but I recognized the word Hale, Victoria's family, her mother's maiden name. Marcus read further. Hale Media Solutions is a subsidiary of Hale Enterprises, which is owned by Diane Hale. Victoria had not just received the fake video from some concerned former employee, she had manufactured it, using her own family's company, her own resources, her own expertise. This was not desperation. This was premeditation. Marcus opened the original folder. Inside was the raw security footage from the day the fake video claimed to show. Unedited, uncut, time-stamped with the castle's actual security system. He pressed play. The study appeared on screen, empty. My grandfather entered alone around 2:15 in the afternoon. He sat in his leather chair. He picked up a book, a hardcover novel I recognized. He had been reading it that month, a historical fiction about the Revolutionary War. He read for a while. His eyes grew heavy. He fell asleep in the chair. The book slipped from his hands onto his lap. At 2:47, the exact moment the fabricated video claimed to show me manipulating him, my grandfather was asleep, alone, untouched. The footage continued. He woke up around 3:30, stretched, walked out of the study. The room stayed empty for the rest of the day. I never appeared, not once, because I was not there. I had not visited the castle that day at all. The truth in pixels. The lie exposed by the very system Victoria had tried to weaponize against me. Marcus closed the laptop. "When court resumes, I am going to request permission to present this evidence. I am going to show exactly how they created this lie. And then I am going to ask the judge to refer this matter to the district attorney. Will the judge accept evidence from an anonymous source?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "The metadata is verifiable. The original footage is verifiable. The source matters less than the substance. Besides, Schultz introduced unverified evidence first. He opened this door. We are just walking through it. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. The same format as before. Brief, direct, 6 words. You are welcome. Watch the sister. I looked up, scanning the hallway outside the conference room. Whoever had sent that USB was still watching. Still helping. But why? And what did they mean about Victoria? The recess was ending. We gathered our materials. The laptop, the USB drive, the evidence that would destroy Victoria's fabrication. As we walked back toward the courtroom, I felt different. Not confident exactly, but no longer helpless. I had the truth. I had the proof. I had a weapon. Victoria was already seated when we entered, composed, waiting. She did not know what was coming. She thought she had already won. Her expression carried the quiet satisfaction of someone who believed the game was over. She was wrong. Raymond Schultz noticed us immediately. He saw Marcus carrying the laptop. He saw my expression. Determination instead of devastation. His eyes narrowed. He leaned toward Victoria and whispered something. Victoria's reaction was subtle but visible. A flicker of confusion, a slight tension in her shoulders. She had not expected me to recover this quickly. She had not expected me to have anything to fight with. What had changed during the recess? I could almost see the question forming in her mind. Judge Cole resumed his seat. The courtroom settled. "We are back on record," he announced. "Mr. Webb, I believe you requested time to respond to the video evidence. Do you have something to present?" Marcus stood. His voice was calm, professional, the voice of a man holding a royal flush. "Yes, Your Honor. We have evidence that the video presented by Mr. Schultz is not authentic. It was digitally fabricated using footage from multiple sources. And we can prove it." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Ripples of reaction spread through the courtroom. Victoria's hand moved toward her phone. The same motion I had seen before. But this time, Gerald grabbed her wrist, hard. His fingers wrapped around her arm with force that had to hurt. He leaned close and whispered something that made her face go white. Whatever message he delivered, it was not comfort. It was not reassurance. It was a warning. The walls were closing in, and they were starting to turn on each other. Marcus connected the laptop to the courtroom projector with the calm precision of a surgeon preparing to operate. Across the aisle, Victoria sat perfectly still, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She did not know what was coming, but she knew something had changed. "Your Honor," Marcus began, opposing counsel introduced video evidence during the last session. That evidence purports to show my client manipulating her grandfather. We have conducted analysis during the recess. The results are conclusive. He pressed a key. The projector displayed the split-screen comparison. On the left, the video Schultz had played. On the right, a technical analysis overlay showing data points I did not fully understand, but that painted a damning picture. Judge Cole leaned forward in his chair, his expression intent. Whatever doubts the original video had planted, he was clearly willing to hear a counter-argument. "Your Honor, this video claims to have been recorded on March 15th of last year at 2:47 in the afternoon." Marcus pointed to a line of code displayed beneath the image. However, the metadata embedded in the file tells a different story. He highlighted a timestamp. This file was created 6 weeks ago, not last March. It was assembled using video editing software. Specifically, Adobe Premiere Pro, professional-grade tools for digital manipulation. Raymond Schultz attempted an interruption. "Your Honor, metadata can be manipulated. This proves nothing about the authenticity of the original footage." Judge Cole raised his hand. "Let him finish, counsel. You had your turn." Schultz sat back down. His face had lost some of its color. The confidence that had carried him through the morning was cracking at the edges. Marcus continued, his voice steady as stone. "Let me show the court exactly how this fabrication was constructed." He advanced the video to the 0:47 mark. Listen carefully to my client's voice in this section. The audio played through the courtroom speakers. My voice, clear and recognizable. Just sign here, grandfather. A pause. It is what we discussed. Now, Marcus said, let me show you the audio waveform. This is a visual representation of the sound frequencies in the recording. The screen displayed two parallel lines of peaks and valleys, the patterns of human speech rendered in graphic form. Notice this discontinuity at the 47-second mark. He zoomed in. The discontinuity was obvious once you knew to look for it. A gap in the waveform. A splice point where two separate recordings had been joined together. The phrase, just sign here, grandfather was recorded separately from it, is what we discussed. These are not continuous speech. They were cut from different conversations entirely. He pressed another key. We have the original audio source. My voice filled the courtroom again. But this time, the full context was clear. Just sign here, grandfather. Mrs. Patterson will love it. She has been with us 30 years. Marcus let the recording play out, the warmth in my voice, the casual affection, a granddaughter asking her grandfather to sign a birthday card for a beloved employee. My client was asking her grandfather to add his signature to a birthday card for the castle's longtime caretaker. The words after grandfather were deleted and replaced with fabricated audio designed to suggest manipulation. Victoria's hands were shaking now. I could see them trembling against the edge of the table. The composure she had maintained all day was finally crumbling. Raymond Schultz's phone buzzed again. He picked it up, read the message, and his face went gray. Not pale. Gray. The color of a man watching his career collapse in real time. He turned to Victoria and whispered something urgent. She shook her head sharply. He whispered again. She kept shaking her head. But the audio manipulation is only part of the fabrication, Marcus continued, drawing the court's attention back to the screen. The visual elements are equally fraudulent. He advanced to frames 1247 through 1389. This is the section where my client allegedly appears in the study with her grandfather. Watch her outline carefully. He zoomed in on the figure that looked like me. Notice the edge artifacts around her body. These are signs of digital compositing. Her image was inserted into footage where it does not belong. Her shadow falls at a slightly different angle than the furniture. The lighting on her face does not match the ambient lighting in the room. He pulled up a comparison image. We have identified the source footage used for my client's image. This is security footage from 2 months earlier. My client walking through the castle hallway. Different day, different clothes, different context. Her figure was extracted, resized, and digitally inserted into the study footage. The sophistication of the deception was now fully visible. Layer by layer, Marcus was stripping away the lie. And here is what the study actually looked like on March 15th, at 2:47 in the afternoon. The original footage played, unedited, unmanipulated, time-stamped with the castle's actual security system. My grandfather sat alone in his leather chair, reading a book. His eyes grew heavy. He fell asleep. At 2:47, the exact moment the fabricated video claimed I was manipulating him, he was sleeping peacefully, alone, untouched. No granddaughter, no documents, no manipulation. Just an old man taking an afternoon nap in the room he loved most. The footage continued. He woke up, walked out. The room stayed empty. I never appeared, because I was not there. Diane made a sound from the gallery, not a word, just a small strangled noise in the back of her throat. She was crying, real tears this time, not performance, fear. Judge Cole's expression had transformed. Where doubt had lived minutes ago, there was now cold fury. "Mr. Schultz," he said, his voice like ice, "I want an explanation, now." Schultz rose slowly. A man walking to his own execution. "Your Honor, my client provided this video to me. I was assured of its authenticity. I had no reason to believe the footage had been altered." You introduced fabricated evidence into my courtroom. Judge Cole's voice rose. You accused a woman of elder abuse based on a manufactured video. And your defense is that you did not verify it? Victoria stood without permission. Her voice was sharp, defensive. I did not know. The video was given to me. I did not create it. I trusted the source. I believed it was real. Judge Cole turned his gaze on her. It felt like being targeted by a weapon. Who gave you this video, Ms. Hale? Victoria hesitated, a fraction of a second too long. A former employee of the castle. Someone who was concerned about my grandfather's welfare. The lie hung in the air like poison. Marcus spoke calmly. Your Honor, the editing software used to create this video is licensed to a company called Hale Media Solutions. That company is a subsidiary of Hale Enterprises, which is owned by the petitioner's mother, Diane Hale. He paused, letting the implication settle. The video was not received from an outside source. It was manufactured in-house, using professional tools, with deliberate intent to deceive this court. The fracture that had been building all day finally cracked open. Gerald stood abruptly from the gallery. This has nothing to do with me. His voice was too loud, too desperate. I did not know about any video editing. Victoria handled all of this. I was just supporting my stepdaughter. Victoria whipped around to face him. The mask of family unity shattered. You were in every meeting. Her voice was raw with accusation. You approved every step. Do not you dare pretend you did not know. Enough. Judge Cole's voice cracked like thunder across the courtroom. The single word silenced everything. Gerald froze mid-step toward the door. Victoria's mouth hung open. Diane sobbed quietly in her seat. I sat perfectly still, watching a family destroy itself in real time. Watching decades of greed and resentment finally crack the foundation they had built on lies. In the silence that followed, a memory surfaced, clear and sharp as broken glass. 3 months before my grandfather died. The last time I saw him truly angry. We were in his study, the same room shown in the fabricated video. He was reviewing footage on his laptop, his expression dark. Alexandra, come look at this. On the screen, I saw Gerald, walking through the castle at night, trying doors, testing locks, moving with the careful stealth of someone who did not want to be caught. He thinks I do not know, my grandfather said. He thinks these old eyes miss things. But I have been watching him for 20 years. I know what he wants. I know what he will do to get it. He closed the laptop. I have upgraded everything, cameras in every room, off-site backup, multiple copies stored with people I trust. He looked at me with tired, knowing eyes. If they ever try to use footage against you, the originals will prove the truth. I had not understood then, not fully, but I understood now. My grandfather had known this day would come. He had built a fortress of truth around me. Cameras, backups, trusted allies, everything designed to protect me from the lies he knew they would tell. The anonymous USB, the metadata analysis, the original footage. Someone loyal to my grandfather had kept copies, waited for the right moment, delivered the weapons exactly when I needed them. He was still protecting me. Even now. The courtroom snapped back into focus. Judge Cole was speaking, his voice heavy with authority. I have presided over many estate disputes. I have seen families tear themselves apart over money, property, pride. He paused. His eyes moved across the room, landing on Victoria, on Gerald, on Diane. But I have never seen such blatant, calculated fraud presented to this court. The ruling came like hammer blows. The video evidence introduced by Mr. Schultz is hereby stricken from the record. The petitioner's emergency motion is denied with prejudice. I am referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation of evidence tampering, fraud, and perjury. Victoria made a sound like a wounded animal. Additionally, I am imposing sanctions on counsel and the petitioner for bad faith litigation. A full accounting of fees incurred by the respondent will be required for reimbursement. Mr. Crane rose from his position near the clerk's desk. His voice remained perfectly level despite the chaos around him. "Your Honor, if I may address one additional matter." Judge Cole nodded. "The Pembroke Family Preservation Trust contains a no-contest clause." The words fell like a guillotine. "Any beneficiary who challenges the trust's validity through litigation, fraud, or interference forfeits their entire distribution. Based on today's proceedings, that clause has been triggered." He turned toward Victoria. Victoria Hale was named as a secondary beneficiary, 15% of liquid assets. That distribution is now forfeited. Victoria did not scream, did not protest. She simply deflated. All the air, all the fight, all the calculation drained from her face. She sank into her chair like a puppet with cut strings. She looked at me. For the first time, there was no hatred in her eyes, no contempt, no calculation, just devastation, pure and complete. She had tried to take everything, and in doing so, she had lost everything she might have had. Gerald's phone rang. The sound was jarring in the heavy silence. He answered it before anyone could stop him, pressing it to his ear with trembling hands. I watched his face change as he listened. Gray to white, white to something I had never seen before. Pure panic. He ended the call, turned to Diane. 2 words escaped his lips, barely audible but clear enough for me to hear. They know. What did they know? Who had called? What other secrets were about to surface? The questions multiplied in my mind. But one thing was certain. The battle for the castle was not over. It was just beginning. Gerald's words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. They know. Know what? Who had called? But before I could process the implications, Mr. Crane rose from his seat, and the courtroom's attention shifted back to the systematic destruction of everything my sister had tried to steal. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would like to clarify the trust's no-contest provision in full detail." Judge Cole nodded, his expression still dark with anger from the fraud revelation. "Please proceed, Mr. Crane. I want everything on the record." Mr. Crane stood with the same unhurried calm he had displayed since walking through those courtroom doors. Nothing seemed to rattle him. Not the accusations, not the fabricated evidence, not the family tearing itself apart before his eyes. He had seen this before. He would see it again. Families were predictable in their greed. "The Pembroke Family Preservation Trust contains a standard no-contest clause," he began. "This provision states that any beneficiary who challenges the trust through litigation, fraud, or interference forfeits their entire distribution." The clause was specifically designed to prevent exactly what has occurred today. He produced a document from his folder and read the specific language aloud. "Any beneficiary who directly or indirectly contests this trust, or who participates in any action designed to invalidate, modify, or circumvent its terms, shall forfeit all rights to any distribution. The trustee shall have sole discretion in determining whether the clause has been triggered." The words were clinical, legal, precise, but their impact was devastating. "Ms. Victoria Hale was named as a secondary beneficiary," Mr. Crane continued. "She was entitled to 15% of the trust's liquid assets upon proper distribution." He paused. "Let the number settle, based on today's proceedings, specifically the introduction of fabricated evidence and the filing of a bad faith petition. I am formally determining that the no-contest clause has been triggered. Mrs. Hale's distribution is forfeited." Victoria sat frozen. 15% of the liquid assets. I did not know the exact number, but I knew it was substantial. My grandfather had been wealthy. His investments, his savings, his lifetime of careful financial management. 15% could be millions. And she had just burned it to ash trying to take everything. The silence that followed was suffocating. Victoria stared at the table in front of her, her perfectly manicured hands flat against the wood. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Something was building inside her. Pressure that had been contained for years, pushing against walls that were finally crumbling. Then she exploded. "This is wrong. Her voice was raw, nothing like the polished, controlled tone she had used all day. This was something primal, something that had been buried deep and was now clawing its way to the surface. She does not deserve any of this. Victoria pointed at me, her finger trembling with rage. She is nobody. She is just the leftover from my father's first mistake. The words hit like physical blows. But I did not flinch. I had heard worse. I had lived worse. 20 years of small cruelties had prepared me for this moment. My mother raised her after her own mother died. Victoria's voice rose higher. We took her in, we fed her, we clothed her, and she repaid us by stealing our grandfather's affection, by turning him against his real family. Judge Cole's voice cut through her tirade. Ms. Hale, you will control yourself or you will be removed. Victoria did not hear him, or did not care. The dam had broken. Years of resentment poured out like poison from a wound. He was supposed to leave everything to my father, to us. That castle belonged to the Hales. We earned it. We put up with his lectures and his judgment and his endless disapproval for decades, and she just waltzed in and took it all. I listened to her scream about what she deserved, what her family earned, what they were owed. And I realized something that had never been clear to me before. Victoria Hale genuinely believed it. She believed that my grandfather's estate belonged to her by right, that I was an intruder, that 20 years of holiday visits and family dinners had earned her what my grandfather chose to give me. She did not see inheritance as a gift. She saw it as a debt the world owed her. Raymond Schultz rose from his seat. His face was carefully neutral, but I could see the calculation behind his eyes. The ship was sinking, and he was looking for a lifeboat. Your Honor, I request permission to withdraw as counsel. Judge Cole raised an eyebrow. Now? In light of recent developments, I no longer feel I can effectively represent my client. I was not informed of the video's true origins. I was misled about the nature of the evidence I was presenting. He was throwing Victoria under the bus to save himself, distancing himself from the fraud before it could drag him down too. Victoria whipped around to face him. The betrayal in her eyes was almost painful to witness. You cannot leave me. You took our money. You promised results. Schultz did not look at her. He addressed only the judge. I apologize to the court for my role in these proceedings. I believed I was presenting authentic evidence. I was wrong. Judge Cole studied him for a long moment. Your withdrawal is noted, counsel. But do not think this absolves you of responsibility. I will be recommending a review of your conduct to the Bar Association. Schultz nodded once, gathered his papers, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. The door closed behind him with a sound that felt final. Victoria was alone now. No lawyer, no strategy, no shield. Judge Cole turned his attention to Gerald and Diane, who had been trying to make themselves invisible in the gallery. Mr. and Mrs. Hale, you have sat in this courtroom throughout these proceedings. You have supported your daughter's petition. You have provided testimony. I have questions about your involvement. Gerald attempted his defense. The words came out too fast, too desperate. Your Honor, I had no knowledge of any fabricated video. I supported Victoria because I believed her concerns were genuine. I am a victim of deception as much as anyone. Diane echoed him, her voice shaking. We only wanted to protect the family's interests. We never asked anyone to create false evidence. Victoria handled the legal strategy. We just supported her. Mr. Crane spoke again. Your Honor, if I may, while Mr. and Mrs. Hale are not named beneficiaries of the trust, their involvement raises concerns under separate provisions. He produced another document. The trust includes clauses regarding interference by non-beneficiaries. Specifically, any individual who aids, encourages, or participates in efforts to circumvent the trust's terms may be subject to civil action by the trustee. Additionally, any distributions intended for that individual's benefit, through a beneficiary or otherwise, may be blocked. Diane turned to Gerald with fury in her eyes. The The mask of marital unity cracked. "You said this would be simple." Her voice was a sharp whisper that carried through the silent courtroom. "You said she would fold. You said we would be in control by lunchtime." Gerald did not respond. He was staring at his phone again, at whatever message had made him say they know. The alliance that had walked into this courtroom so confident was disintegrating before my eyes. Judge Cole observed the exchange without comment. Then he spoke. "I am not ruling on the interference question today, but I am putting you both on notice. Your conduct will be reviewed, and I strongly suggest you retain separate counsel." The words fell like sentences, not legal sentences, life sentences. I should have felt triumph, victory, satisfaction. I had won. The trust was secure. Victoria was destroyed. Gerald and Diane were facing consequences they had never imagined. But sitting in that courtroom, watching a family tear itself apart, I felt hollow, empty, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left only the shell. My grandfather's voice echoed in my memory, words he had spoken years ago during one of our quiet evenings by the fire. "Do not let them make you hard, Alexandra. Winning against bad people does not make you good. It just makes you the last one standing. What matters is what you do after you win. I had won, but what did winning mean when it left nothing but wreckage?" Judge Cole prepared his formal rulings. The courtroom waited in tense silence. Even Victoria had stopped crying, her face blank with shock. "I am prepared to issue rulings on the matters before this court. Order 1. The petitioner's motion for emergency transfer of the Pembroke estate is denied. The motion was filed in bad faith, supported by fabricated evidence, and constitutes an abuse of this court's process. The petition is dismissed with prejudice. It cannot be refiled. Order 2. The Pembroke Family Preservation Trust is hereby recognized as valid and enforceable. All assets held within the trust remain under the administration of Hawthorne Trust Company. The respondent, Alexandra Pembroke, is confirmed as the primary beneficiary. Order 3. Sanctions are imposed against the petitioner for bad faith litigation. Ms. Hale will reimburse the respondent for all legal fees incurred in defending against this frivolous action. Additionally, I am imposing a fine of $25,000 payable to the court for the introduction of falsified evidence. Order 4. I am referring this matter to the state's attorney for Hartford County. The fabrication and introduction of evidence in a court proceeding is a serious crime. I expect a thorough investigation." He paused. His eyes moved across the courtroom, landing on each person in turn. Order 5. I am issuing a protective order. The petitioner and her parents are prohibited from contacting the respondent, entering the Pembroke estate, or interfering in any way with trust administration. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Victoria did not react to the orders. She sat perfectly still, staring at nothing like a machine that had been switched off. But Gerald was sweating. Actually sweating, drops visible on his forehead under the fluorescent lights. The protective order was not what worried him. Something else was, something the judge had not mentioned yet, something I did not understand. The hearing concluded. Judge Cole rose. The gavel fell. People began to move. Marcus Webb approached me. "You did it?" His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "The trust is secure. Victoria is finished. Your grandfather would be proud." "It does not feel finished," I replied. "Gerald's phone call, the way he looked. Something else is happening." Mr. Crane joined us, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Pembroke, I need to speak with you, privately. There are aspects of your grandfather's estate that were not discussed in open court, things that require discretion." Before he could explain, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. After everything that had happened today, I had no desire to talk to anyone. But something made me answer. The voice on the other end was male, distorted, possibly electronically altered. "Do not think this is over." My blood chilled. The castle has secrets you have not found yet. Your grandfather was not the saint you think he was. And if you are smart, you will walk away before you discover what he was really protecting. The call ended. I stared at my phone. The screen showed call duration. 17 seconds. 17 seconds that had just changed everything. Mr. Crane noticed my expression. Mrs. Pembroke? What is wrong? I looked at him. At Marcus. At the doors through which Gerald and Diane had just disappeared. Someone just told me to walk away from the castle. They said my grandfather was protecting something. Something I have not found yet. Mr. Crane's face went still. Not surprised, something worse, resigned. Like he had been waiting for this moment. Like he knew exactly what the caller meant. We need to get to the castle, he said quietly. Now. Before they do. Mr. Crane drove like a man who had stopped believing in speed limits. The Connecticut countryside blurred past the windows, bare trees and stone walls and frozen fields all melting into a gray-brown smear. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, phone pressed to his ear, making calls I could not fully hear. I sat in the back, replaying the anonymous caller's words in my mind like a song I could not escape. The castle has secrets you have not found yet. Your grandfather was not the saint you think he was. 45 minutes from Hartford to the castle. 45 minutes to wonder what we would find when we arrived. 45 minutes to imagine worst-case scenarios multiplying like cells dividing. Mr. Crane's jaw was set, his hands tight on the steering wheel. He had not explained anything yet. He was waiting. For what? I did not know. Marcus finished one call and immediately started another. Mrs. Patterson, he said into the phone. Has anyone tried to enter the property? A pause. I could not hear her response. Lock everything. Do not open the door for anyone. We are 15 minutes out. He ended the call and turned to look at me. She says there is a car in the driveway. Black sedan. She does not recognize it. My stomach dropped. Gerald. It had to be Gerald. He had made those calls from the courthouse hallway. He had been planning this while we were still in the courtroom. Mr. Crane pressed the accelerator harder. The speedometer climbed past 80. The castle appeared on the horizon as the afternoon light began to fade. Stone towers reaching toward a darkening sky. Ivy-covered walls that had stood for over 100 years. 3 generations of Pembrokes had lived and died within those walls. My father had played in those halls, had learned to ride a bicycle on that circular driveway, had grown up believing this place would be his forever. He died on a road 20 miles from here, and I was beginning to understand that his death had not been an accident. We pulled through the main gates, and I saw it immediately. A black sedan parked near the garden wall, engine still running. Exhaust curled from the tailpipe like breath in cold air. Someone was already here. Mr. Crane parked directly behind the sedan, blocking any escape. Marcus was out of the car before it fully stopped. I followed, ignoring his earlier instruction to stay behind. The front door of the castle stood open. Not broken, just open. Someone had used a key. But only 3 people had keys to the castle. Me, Mrs. Patterson, and my grandfather, who had given one to Gerald years ago, back when he still believed in the possibility of family. Voices echoed from inside. I recognized Mrs. Patterson's first, high and frightened. You cannot be here. There is a court order. Then a male voice. Gerald. His tone was nothing like the controlled businessman I had seen in court. This was raw, desperate, the voice of a man with nothing left to lose. I am not leaving without it. Without what? I ran toward the sound, through the entrance hall, past the grand staircase, toward the east wing. I found them in the hallway outside the library. Gerald stood with his back to me, his posture rigid with tension. Mrs. Patterson blocked the library door, her arms spread wide, her small frame somehow holding him at bay through sheer force of will. She had worked at this castle for 30 years. She had been loyal to my grandfather until the day he died. She was loyal to me now. Gerald spun when he heard my footsteps. His face was red, his eyes wild with something between rage and terror. This was not the man who had sat so smugly in the courtroom gallery. This was someone else entirely, someone I had never seen before. You. The word came out like a curse. You have no idea what you have done. You have no idea what is in this house. Mr. Crane and Marcus caught up to me. Marcus already had his phone out, ready to call the police. Mr. Hale, Mr. Crane said, his voice perfectly level. You are violating a court order. The police have been called. I suggest you leave. Now. Gerald laughed. The sound was jarring, wrong. There was no humor in it, only hysteria. You think I care about police? You think I care about court orders? He stepped toward me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that looked like genuine terror. Not fear of consequences, fear of exposure. Your grandfather destroyed my life, and he left the proof in this house, proof that will destroy yours too. The words hung between us like a threat, but before I could respond, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Gerald's head snapped toward the sound. The wildness in his expression shifted to calculation. He was weighing his options, fighting versus fleeing, destruction versus survival. Survival won. This is not over, he snarled. You will wish you had let me have the castle. He pushed past us and ran toward the back entrance. Moments later, I heard tires screeching on gravel. By the time the police cruisers pulled through the front gates, Gerald was gone. The next hour was a blur of statements and questions. Officers took notes. Mrs. Patterson described what had happened. Gerald had arrived 20 minutes before us, used his key, and demanded to know where the safe was. He kept asking about a hidden safe, Mrs. Patterson said, her hands still trembling. I told him I did not know anything, but he did not believe me. She looked at me then. Her eyes held a question. But you do know, do you not? I did not answer. Not in front of the police, not in front of anyone except the people my grandfather had trusted. After the officers left, after the statements were signed, and the incident documented, I turned to Mr. Crane and Marcus. There is something I need to show you. Something my grandfather showed me 7 years ago. We walked through the castle, through corridors I had known my entire life. But when we reached the East Library, I turned where I had only turned once before. My great-great-grandfather built this during Prohibition, I said, echoing my grandfather's words from years ago. He was a very cautious man. So was my grandfather. I walked to the third bookshelf from the window, reached behind the row of old encyclopedias, found the hidden latch. The bookshelf swung inward silently, revealing a narrow doorway and stone stairs descending into darkness. Marcus stared. Jesus! How long has this been here? Over 100 years. But only 4 people have ever known about it. My great-great-grandfather, my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and me. Mr. Crane did not look surprised. He looked resigned, like he had known this room existed all along, like he had been waiting for me to reveal it. Your grandfather told me about this space, he said quietly. He told me that if I ever had to bring you here, it would mean the worst had happened. He paused. I hoped this day would never come. The stairs were stone, worn smooth by generations of careful feet. The air grew cooler as we descended. At the bottom, a steel door with a keypad glowed faintly in the dim light. The code is my mother's birthday, I said. Month, day, year. I entered the numbers. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The room beyond was exactly as I remembered it. 10 by 12 feet, no windows. Climate-controlled. The cool, dry air wrapped around us like a preservation chamber, which in a way it was. Walls lined with filing cabinets. Each one labeled with my grandfather's precise handwriting. Dates spanning 40 years, business records, family correspondence, legal documents, and one cabinet, separate from the others, bearing a single name, Daniel, my father's name. Mr. Crane spoke. Your grandfather spent 20 years investigating your father's death. He never believed it was an accident. Everything he found is in this room. I walked to the Daniel cabinet. My hands trembled as I pulled open the drawer. Inside were files I had never seen, documents my grandfather had never shown me during that first visit 7 years ago. He had been protecting me then, shielding me from the full horror of what he suspected. I was not being shielded now. Police reports from the accident, copies obtained through private investigators, annotated in my grandfather's handwriting, mechanic records for my father's car. The brake system had been serviced 2 weeks before the crash. Past inspection, no issues noted. Phone records showing calls between Gerald and an unknown number. Multiple calls in the days before the accident. Short calls, the kind you make when you are giving instructions. Financial records showing Gerald's debts, massive debts, the kind that destroy careers and marriages and lives, the kind that make desperate men do desperate things. Insurance policy documents. Gerald had helped my father take out a $3 million life insurance policy 6 months before he died. I pulled out a photograph, black and white, grainy, clearly taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. It showed 2 men standing beside a car, my father's car. The blue BMW he had driven everywhere. One man was Gerald, younger but unmistakable. The same sharp features, the same calculating eyes. The other man I did not recognize, heavy set, rough hands, the posture of someone who worked with machines. The date stamp in the corner made my blood freeze. 3 days before my father's accident. I turned the photograph over. On the back, in my grandfather's handwriting, were words that confirmed everything I had suspected and feared. The mechanic. Gerald paid him $50,000. Cash. My father did not die in an accident. He was murdered. By the man who married my mother 2 years later. By the man who raised me. By the man who had been trying to steal my inheritance in a Hartford courtroom just hours ago. 20 years of evidence. Documented, organized, preserved. My grandfather could not prove it in court. The witnesses had disappeared. The evidence had been destroyed. But he had never stopped searching. Never stopped hoping that one day justice would be possible. Mr. Crane guided me to the desk in the corner of the room. There is something else. Something he left specifically for you. To be delivered only if you discovered this room on your own. He opened the desk drawer. Inside was a single envelope. My name written in my grandfather's hand. The handwriting I had known my entire life. The handwriting that meant safety and love and truth. I opened it with shaking fingers. The letter inside was dated 3 months before his death. The same time he had shown me the security system. The same time he had started saying goodbye without ever using the word. My dearest Alexandra, if you are reading this, then the worst has happened, not my death. I have been ready for that, but the attack I always knew would come. I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago, something I protected you from because I thought ignorance would keep you safe. I was wrong. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Your father was murdered. I am as certain of this as I am of anything in my life. Gerald Hale sabotaged his car. He did it for money, for control, for greed. I spent 20 years gathering evidence. Everything is in this room. I could not prove it in court. The witnesses disappeared. The mechanic died. The records were buried. But I never stopped. And now I am giving everything to you. I turned the page. The letter continued. I am sorry I could not give you justice while I was alive. I am sorry I could not protect Daniel. I am sorry that loving this family meant watching it destroy itself. Then, at the bottom of the page, a final instruction. Call this number, Morrison Investigations. Tell them your grandfather sent you. They have been waiting for 20 years. I stared at the phone number. 10 digits that could change everything. I took out my phone. My hands were steady now. The shock had crystallized into something harder, something sharper. I dialed. It rang twice. A voice answered. Male, older, gravel and patience. Morrison Investigations. I took a breath. My name is Alexandra Pembroke. My grandfather sent me. Silence on the other end. Then a long exhale. The sound of a man who had been holding his breath for 2 decades. I have been waiting for this call for 20 years. Edward told me you would call eventually. He told me what to do when you did. He paused. I worked your father's case from the beginning. I know what Gerald did. I know how he did it. Your grandfather paid me to keep investigating even when everyone else gave up. My chest tightened. And last year something changed. What changed? The mechanic who worked on your father's car? We thought he was dead. He was not. He was hiding. In witness protection for an unrelated case. Morrison's voice dropped. He reached out to me 6 months ago. He is ready to talk. He is ready to testify. A witness, still alive, ready to testify. After 20 years, justice might actually be possible. My grandfather did not just leave me evidence, he left me a weapon. There is one more thing, Morrison said. What? The mechanic. He did not just work on your father's car. A pause. Heavy with meaning. Gerald hired him for a second job, a job he never completed. My blood went cold. What job? Edward Pembroke's car. 3 years ago. Gerald tried to kill your grandfather the same way he killed your father. Gerald tried to kill my grandfather. The same method. The same mechanic. The same cold, calculated approach to murder that had worked 20 years before. The only reason my grandfather lived long enough to die of natural causes was because someone warned him first. Morrison's voice continued through the phone, steady and patient. Who warned him? I asked. My voice sounded distant to my own ears, like it belonged to someone else, the mechanic himself. He got cold feet the second time, realized that killing a Pembroke once was survivable. Twice would bring investigators who would not stop, so he disappeared instead, took witness protection for an unrelated fraud case, and vanished. The bitter irony settled over me like a shroud. The man who helped kill my father had saved my grandfather. Not from conscience, not from remorse, from self-preservation. 20 years of cowardice followed by a single act of accidental mercy. I sat on the floor of the secret room now, the letter from my grandfather still clutched in my hands. Mr. Crane and Marcus stood nearby, giving me space, watching me process what I had just learned. I felt like someone had rewritten my entire history in blood. Your grandfather knew, Morrison said through the phone. After the mechanic warned him, Edward spent the last 3 years of his life preparing for 2 things: his death and your survival. Everything he did. The trust, the documents, the secret room. It was all designed to protect you from a man he knew was a murderer. The words washed over me. Protection. That was what my grandfather had been doing all along. Not just building a legal fortress around his estate, building a fortress around me, around the truth, around the possibility of justice. What do I do now? The question hung in the air. Morrison did not answer immediately. He was giving me time to process, time to decide. I closed my eyes, and the secret room faded away. 20 years ago. A Thursday morning in early spring. The smell of pancakes and maple syrup, sunlight streaming through kitchen windows. My father stood at the stove, spatula in hand, flour dusted across his shirt. He was 34 years old, dark hair, warm eyes, a smile that made everything feel safe. I was 8, sitting at the kitchen table with my legs swinging because they did not reach the floor yet. I did not know that this morning would be the last. I did not know that memories could be so ordinary and so precious at the same time. Eat up, sweetheart, big day today. What is the big day, Daddy? Business meeting, very boring, but after I am coming straight home. Promise? He turned from the stove and looked at me, really looked, like he was memorizing my face. Promise. He kissed my mother goodbye. She was still alive then, still healthy, still smiling in a way I would not see again after that day. He ruffled my hair, grabbed his briefcase and his keys. The blue BMW waited in the driveway, gleaming in the morning sun, Love you both. See you tonight. Those were the last words I ever heard my father say. I did not know it then. I was 8 years old, and I thought promises were unbreakable things. I thought fathers were immortal. The day continued in ordinary ways. I went to school. My mother went to work. Hours passed like they always did, unremarkable and unhurried. The call came at 4:47 in the afternoon. I remember my mother's face changing, the phone dropping from her hand, a sound that was not quite a scream but should have been. There has been an accident. Your father. The rest was blur. The rest had always been blur. Sirens and strangers and adults speaking in hushed tones. A hospital waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and grief. I did not see my father's body. They said it was better that way. The car had gone through a guardrail on Route 7. Brake failure on a mountain road. Dead on impact. The funeral was rain and black umbrellas. A casket that seemed too small to hold everything my father had been. I held my mother's hand and did not understand. Could not understand. My grandfather Edward stood apart from everyone else, his face carved from stone. He did not cry. He did not speak. He just watched the casket lower into the ground with eyes that held something I was too young to recognize. Suspicion. Gerald Hale stood in the back of the mourners, watching, waiting. I did not know then what he was waiting for. I did not know that he had already started planning what came next. 2 years later, my mother remarried. Gerald was charming. Gerald was helpful. Gerald was there when she needed someone to lean on. I was 10 years old when he became my stepfather. I was 10 years old when I started living with the man who killed my father. I never liked him. I could never explain why. Some part of me knew. Some animal instinct that recognized a predator even when my conscious mind could not. Now I understood. My body had remembered what my mind could not. The memory dissolved. The stone walls of the secret room solidified around me. The cool underground air replaced the warmth of that long-ago kitchen. I was not 8 anymore. I was 28. And I had a choice to make. Morrison's voice came through the phone again. "Ms. Pembroke, are you still there?" "I am here. What do you want to do?" The question was simple. The answer was not. I could walk away. Let the trust protect the castle. Live with the knowledge but take no action. Bury the truth the way Gerald had buried my father. Or I could take everything in this room to someone who could use it. Risk everything. Expose everything. Tear apart what remained of my family in pursuit of justice for a man who had been dead for 20 years. "I want to meet the mechanic," I said. "I want to hear what he has to say. And then I want to take every piece of evidence in this room to someone who can use it." Morrison exhaled, a sound of relief, of satisfaction. "I will arrange the meeting, tomorrow morning. Bring your lawyer, bring the trust representative." He paused. "And Ms. Pembroke? Your grandfather would be proud. He always said you were the strongest Pembroke he had ever known." The call ended. The silence that followed was heavy, but not hopeless. Mr. Crane spoke for the first time in several minutes. "There is something you should know about why your grandfather chose Hawthorne Trust specifically." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Old, worn at the edges. A name I did not recognize. This was the trustee who handled Edward's account for 30 years. He retired last year. Mr. Crane paused. His name was Robert Morrison, the detective's brother. The web of protection my grandfather had built became suddenly, startlingly clear. He had not just hired a detective and a trust company, he had hired family. People who would never betray each other. Every piece of the puzzle had been carefully chosen. Every relationship designed to protect me. Even from beyond the grave, my grandfather was still keeping me safe. The next hours blurred together. Marcus, Mr. Crane, and I worked through the night, photographing every document in the Daniel cabinet, creating digital backups, organizing the evidence into categories that a prosecutor could use. Category 1. Motive. Gerald's financial records from 20 years ago painted a picture of a man drowning in debt, failed investments, bad loans, gambling losses, over $2 million in the red with creditors closing in. A man desperate enough to do anything. Category 2. Opportunity. Phone records showing Gerald's contact with the mechanic in the week before the crash. The photograph of them standing beside my father's car, taken 3 days before the accident. Bank records showing a $50,000 cash withdrawal from Gerald's account, the same amount the mechanic had allegedly been paid. Category 3. Method. Service records for my father's BMW brakes inspected and passed 2 weeks before the crash. The accident report citing catastrophic brake failure. The mechanic's professional expertise. Brake systems. Category 4. Cover-up. The car had been scrapped within days of the accident. Evidence destroyed before anyone thought to look closely. The mechanic had disappeared shortly after, moving out of state, changing jobs, leaving no forwarding address. Gerald's lawyer had made quiet inquiries about the investigation, ensuring it went nowhere. Insurance payout of $3 million deposited into my father's estate, an estate managed by Gerald Hale as stepfather to the sole heir. Marcus spoke, his voice tight with anger. He used your father's death to fund his entire career. The insurance money, the access to Pembroke connections, the legitimacy of being married into the family. He looked at me with something like grief in his eyes. He did not just kill your father. He built his life on the corpse. The words should have devastated me. Instead, they hardened something inside me. Grief transmuted into determination. Sorrow into steel. The next morning, we drove to Hartford, to the district attorney's office, to a woman named Catherine Walsh, who had spent 23 years prosecuting criminals and had never lost her appetite for justice. She was in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had read the preliminary brief Marcus sent at 3 a.m. The file sat open on her desk, pages marked with sticky notes and highlighter. "This is extraordinary," she said. Her voice was careful, measured. The voice of someone who had seen too many cases fall apart to let herself hope too quickly. "If even half of this is verifiable, we have a case." "Murder in the first degree," Marcus said. 20 years old, but no statute of limitations. Walsh nodded. "The witness testimony will be crucial. The documentary evidence is strong but circumstantial on its own. Morrison has arranged for the mechanic to be transported under marshal supervision," I said. "He is in witness protection for a separate case. He is prepared to testify." Walsh leaned forward. "In exchange for what?" "Immunity on his role in the conspiracy. He will give a full account of Gerald Hale's instructions." The district attorney considered this. Her pen tapped against the desk in a steady rhythm. "I will need to verify the evidence independently. The mechanic's testimony will need to be corroborated. We will need to build a case that can withstand scrutiny." She met my eyes. "But if everything checks out, I can have a grand jury presentation within the month. Arrest warrant as soon as they indict." The timeline crystallized. Within a month, Gerald Hale could be in handcuffs. Within a year, he could be standing trial for murder. Within 2 years, he could be spending the rest of his life in prison. 20 years of waiting. And now, justice was finally within reach. Walsh leaned back in her chair and studied me with something like respect. "Ms. Pembroke, I have been doing this job for 23 years. I have seen families tear themselves apart over much less." She paused. "Are you sure you want to do this? Because once we start, there is no going back. Your stepfather, your stepsister, your entire family history. It all becomes public record." I thought about my father, about the promise he had made on that Thursday morning 20 years ago, about the promise that was broken before dinner. I thought about my grandfather, about 20 years of investigation, about filing cabinets full of evidence gathered one piece at a time, about a dying man still fighting for justice he would never see. "My father deserves justice," I said. "My grandfather spent 20 years fighting for it. I am not going to stop now." Walsh nodded. The respect in her eyes deepened. Then let us get to work. We spent hours in her office, going through documents, answering questions, building the framework of a case that would finally hold Gerald Hale accountable. When we finally left, the sun was setting over Hartford. Orange and pink streaked across the sky like fire. I felt something I had not felt in days. Not happiness, not relief, purpose, direction, momentum. The wheels of justice were turning. Finally. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. After everything that had happened, I had no desire to hear from anyone I did not know. But something made me look. The message was not from a stranger. Alexandra. It is Victoria. I stared at the screen. My half-sister, my enemy. The woman who had tried to steal my inheritance with fabricated evidence. The woman who had called me nobody in open court. I need to see you, alone. I kept reading. I know what my father did. I did not know before. I swear I did not. Please, give me 1 hour. I will tell you everything. Marcus noticed my expression. It could be a trap, he said. Gerald knows what is coming. This could be his play. Mr. Crane offered a different perspective, or it could be genuine. Victoria was used by her father. That much is clear. Whether she knew the full truth is another matter. But she might have information we need. I looked at the message again. The woman who had attacked me in court was asking for a meeting, claiming ignorance, asking for a chance to explain. Every instinct told me to refuse, to protect myself, to stay far away from anyone named Hale. But another part of me wanted to know, needed to know. Was Victoria a villain, or was she another victim of the same man who had destroyed my family? I will meet her, I said. Not alone. You will both be nearby. But I want to hear what she has to say. If she knew what Gerald did, I need to know. And if she did not, then she is as much a victim as I am. I texted back 2 words. 1 hour. Victoria's response came immediately. The old gazebo, behind the castle. Where we used to play when we were kids. I stared at the message. The gazebo. I had not been there in 15 years. Neither had Victoria. And what did she mean, where we used to play? We never played together. Not once. Something was wrong. Something did not add up. But I was going anyway. The gazebo stood at the edge of the east garden, half hidden by overgrown hedges that no one had trimmed since my grandfather became too weak to walk the grounds. It was a ghost of the place I remembered from childhood, white paint peeling, lattice broken in places, roof sagging under the weight of years and neglect. Victoria was already there, sitting on the weathered bench like she was waiting for a bus that would never come. I walked alone across the frozen garden, as we had agreed. But Marcus and Mr. Crane were positioned near the garden entrance, close enough to reach me in seconds if anything went wrong. I could see them from the corner of my eye, shadows against the darkening sky. Victoria looked different. Gone was the tailored cream coat and perfect posture from the courtroom. She wore jeans and a wrinkled sweater, her hair pulled back carelessly. No makeup. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She had been crying. Not the performative tears she had displayed for the judge. Real tears. The kind that leave you hollow. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Not the predator from the courtroom. Something else entirely. She looked up as I approached. Her expression held no calculation, no hostility, just exhaustion so deep it seemed to have seeped into her bones. You came. You said you had something to tell me. I did not think you would actually come. Not after everything. I sat on the opposite end of the bench. Maximum distance between us. Trust was not something I could offer. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Talk. Victoria's hands were shaking. I noticed them as she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Not the trembling of cold. It was 60 degrees, mild for Connecticut in late fall. This was fear. Whatever Victoria was about to tell me, it terrified her. I did not know about your father. Her voice was hoarse, exhausted, like she had been screaming for hours and had nothing left. I swear to you, Alexandra, I did not know. I watched her face, looking for the lie, looking for the performance, but all I saw was devastation. I found out yesterday, after the court hearing, after everything fell apart. How? Victoria stared at her phone like it held all the answers, or all the nightmares. My father came home that night. He was drunk, panicking. I have never seen him like that. He was making phone calls, pacing, talking to himself. She swallowed hard. I heard him on the phone. He was trying to arrange something, flights, money transfers. I could not understand most of it. But then he said something that made me stop breathing. What did he say? He said, "If she finds out what really happened to Daniel, it is over." The name hung between us. My father's name. Spoken by the man who killed him. I confronted him, Victoria continued. I demanded to know what he meant. At first he denied everything. Told me I had misheard. Told me I was being paranoid. She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. But he was drunk. Too drunk to maintain the lie. And I kept pushing. I would not let it go. Her eyes met mine. For the first time, I saw something other than hatred or calculation in them. I saw devastation. He told me everything. 20 years of lies, poured out in 20 minutes. She was crying now, tears rolling down her cheeks unchecked. He killed your father, for money, for the company, for access to your family's wealth. He married your mother to stay close to the estate, and when your grandfather started asking questions, he tried to kill him too. I already knew these things, Morrison had told me. The evidence in the secret room had confirmed it, but hearing it from Victoria, hearing her voice crack as she spoke, that was different. Do you know what he said when I asked him why? Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper. Why he killed Daniel Pembroke? I shook my head. He said, because he was in the way. The words landed like stones. That is it. That is the whole reason. Your father was in the way of what my father wanted. So he removed him, like taking out the trash. Victoria's hands covered her face. Her shoulders shook with sobs. I have been afraid of him my whole life. He never hit me, nothing that obvious. But he controlled everything, my education, my career, my relationships. Every choice I ever made was really his choice. I thought if I did everything he wanted, he would finally be satisfied. But it was never enough. It was never going to be enough. I watched her cry. Part of me wanted to hate her. Part of me still did. She had attacked me in court. She had manufactured evidence to steal my inheritance. She had called me nobody. But another part of me recognized something familiar, the weight of Gerald's shadow. We had both lived under it, different sides of the same prison. Why are you telling me this? The question cut through her tears. She looked up at me with hollow eyes. I have something for you. She held out her phone. After I confronted him, after he told me everything, I started recording. He did not know. He was too drunk, too panicked to notice. She pulled up an audio file. I got all of it. The recording played. Gerald's voice, slurred but clear, describing how he sabotaged my father's brakes, describing how he paid the mechanic, describing his panic about the room in the castle, about the evidence he knew my grandfather had hidden. And then something else, something that made my blood freeze. He is leaving tonight. Victoria's voice was urgent now. He booked a flight to a country with no extradition treaty. 9:30 tonight, private airfield in Westchester. I checked the time. 7:45, less than 2 hours. He thinks if he gets out before they can arrest him, he is free, Victoria continued. He has been planning this for years. A backup plan in case everything fell apart. 20 years of evidence. A living witness ready to testify. A confession on tape. All of it worthless if Gerald boarded that plane. Why are you giving me this? Victoria looked at me. The question hung between us like a test. You could have stayed silent. You could have protected him. I know, so why? Because I am tired. The answer was simple, and somehow that made it feel true. I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of being his weapon. And I am tired of being the villain in someone else's story. She reached out her hand. Not to touch me, just to bridge the distance. Help me stop him. Please. I looked at her hand, at the tears on her face, at the broken woman who had been my enemy just hours ago. Not friendship, not forgiveness, something harder to name. Two women who shared a wound, a common enemy. I pulled out my phone and signaled Marcus. He ran over with Mr. Crane. "Gerald is running," I said. "Flight at 9:30, private airfield in Westchester. We have recordings, a confession." Marcus was already dialing. "D.A. Walsh needs to know." "Now." Walsh answered on the second ring. Her voice was sharp, alert. "I can have state troopers at the airfield in 40 minutes, she said after I explained. "But I need probable cause for an arrest. I am sending you audio files now. Gerald Hale confessing to murder." Silence. Then the sound of her chair creaking as she leaned forward. "Send it. I will have a warrant issued in 15 minutes. Marcus calculated the timeline. Current time 7:45. "Flight at 9:30. Drive to Westchester 90 minutes normally. We need to move now." Victoria spoke up. "I know the airfield. I have been there before. He uses a private hangar. North side, away from the main terminal. There is a back access road. If we come from the east, we can cut 20 minutes. She knew because Gerald had made her fly with him before. Business trips, control trips, every piece of her life had been dictated by him. Mr. Crane looked at her. "Miss Hale, you realize that by helping us, you are testifying against your own father." Victoria met his eyes. Something in her expression shifted, hardened. "He stopped being my father the moment I learned what he really was. Actually, that is not true. He was never my father. He was my owner. There is a difference. 2 cars. Marcus drove me. Mr. Crane followed with Victoria." The castle disappeared in the rearview mirror. The sky was darkening, stars emerging one by one. Somewhere ahead, Gerald Hale was preparing to escape. 20 years of justice rode on the next 2 hours. The airfield appeared at 9:17, 13 minutes to spare. Victoria's shortcut had worked. Small runway, private hangars, a single Gulfstream jet sat on the tarmac, engines already running. Lights on, ready for departure. State trooper cars blocked the main entrance. But Gerald was not at the main entrance. His car sat at the north hangar, exactly where Victoria had said it would be. He was walking toward the jet, briefcase in hand, 50 yards from freedom. The troopers converged from both sides. Someone shouted through a megaphone, "Gerald Hale, stop where you are." Gerald froze, turned. His eyes scanned the scene, the police, the cars, the coordinated response he had not expected. Then he saw me, standing beside Victoria, his daughter, his stepdaughter. The 2 women he had tried to control, manipulate, use, united against him. Something broke behind his eyes. Not remorse, not fear, something worse. The realization that his entire life's work, the lies, the murders, the manipulation, had all been for nothing. He ran, toward the jet, toward escape, toward the freedom he thought he could still reach. He made it 10 yards before the troopers tackled him, face pressed into the tarmac, handcuffs clicking shut around his wrists. "Gerald Hale, you are under arrest for the murder of Daniel Pembroke." The words echoed across the airfield. Final, absolute. Gerald was hauled to his feet. His suit was torn. His face was bloody from the impact. His eyes found mine. "Your grandfather," he spat. "That old bastard. He did this." I walked closer, close enough to be heard, close enough to see the hatred in his eyes. "No," I said. "My father did this. You killed him, and he still won." Gerald's face crumbled. He had no response. 20 years of confidence, scheming, winning, ended by a dead man's daughter and the records a dead man kept. They loaded him into a state trooper's car. The jet's engines shut down. The pilot was questioned but not arrested. He did not know what his passenger had done. Gerald's briefcase was seized. Inside, they found cash, a false passport, documents for a life that would never happen now. Victoria stood apart from everything. She had watched her father's arrest without expression. Now she stood alone near the hangar, arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. I walked to her. "What happens now? You will have to testify. The recordings, everything you know, I know. The DA will want a full statement. I will give her one." Silence, wind across the tarmac, the distant sound of sirens fading. "I am sorry," Victoria said, "for everything. The court, the video, calling you nobody, I know. You do not have to forgive me, I know that too. Not reconciliation, not friendship, but something. An acknowledgement. Two women who survived the same monster." Marcus approached with news. "Diane filed for divorce this morning. Before anyone knew Gerald was running. She is cooperating with investigators. Claims she did not know about Daniel." He shrugged. "She is trying to save herself. Some things never change. Diane had always been a survivor. She would abandon anyone to protect herself." As we drove away from the airfield, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, the same format as before. 5 words that made my blood freeze. "The castle holds one more secret." I looked back at the road ahead, at the darkness pressing against the windows. What else had my grandfather buried? What else was left to find? The anonymous text haunted me all the way back to the castle. The castle holds one more secret. I had thought the secret room contained everything, every document, every piece of evidence, every weapon my grandfather had prepared. I was wrong. It was nearly midnight when we arrived. The castle stood dark against a sky full of stars, its stone walls absorbing the moonlight. Mrs. Patterson had left lamps burning in the main hall, warm light spilling through the windows like a beacon. I walked through the entrance I had known my entire life. The same marble floors, the same portraits on the walls, the same smell of old wood and history. But tonight it felt different, emptier, and somehow more mine than it had ever been. Marcus and Mr. Crane followed me to the secret room. The steel door stood open from our earlier visit, the filing cabinet still pulled out, documents still spread across the desk. Everything was as we had left it. But the text said one more secret. Something I had not found yet. I stood in the center of the room and looked at it with new eyes. My grandfather had been meticulous, deliberate. Every detail mattered. Every placement had purpose. If there was something else hidden here, it would not be obvious. It would be protected. The safe in the corner. I had opened it 7 years ago when my grandfather first showed me this room. It contained his most important documents. The original trust papers, deeds to the property, financial records. But behind the safe, against the stone wall, I noticed something I had never seen before. A seam, barely visible. A thin line where the mortar between stones was slightly different in color, slightly newer. I pushed against the wall. Nothing happened. I pressed harder. Still nothing. Then I remembered. My grandfather never did anything without purpose. If there was a hidden panel, there would be a mechanism. Something that required knowledge only he would share. I ran my fingers along the seam. At the bottom corner, I felt a small indentation. A button disguised to look like a chip in the stone. I pressed it. A soft click. The panel shifted inward, revealing a small compartment barely 6 inches deep. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age. The handwriting on the front was not my grandfather's. It was my mother's. I would recognize those loops and curves anywhere, the way she dotted her eyes with tiny circles. The slight forward slant of someone who wrote quickly because her mind moved faster than her hand. I had forgotten what her handwriting looked like. But seeing it now, everything came rushing back. Birthday cards, grocery lists, notes tucked into my lunchbox. All those small pieces of her I had buried so deep, I thought they were gone forever. The envelope was labeled in her careful script. For Alexandra. When she is ready. My mother's name was signed at the bottom. Elizabeth. The date made my heart stop. 2 weeks before she died. She had known she was dying. And she had left this for me. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. The paper inside was fragile, carefully preserved. My grandfather must have hidden it here, waiting for the right moment. The moment I would understand, my darling Alexandra. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and so is your grandfather. I am sorry I will not be there to tell you this myself. There are things I need you to know about Gerald Hale. My chest tightened, my mother's voice reaching across 20 years of silence. I married him because I was afraid. After your father died, I was drowning. Gerald was there. He was helpful, he was kind, or so I thought. By the time I realized what he really was, it was too late. I was sick. I did not have the strength to fight him. But I could protect you, and I could warn you. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Gerald is dangerous, Alexandra. More dangerous than you know. I do not have proof of what I suspect. But your grandfather does. He has been watching Gerald for years. He knows things he has not told me. When the time comes, trust your grandfather. Trust his documents. Trust the records he keeps. They will save you when I cannot. I turned the page. The letter continued. I want you to know that loving you was the best thing I ever did. Marrying Gerald was my biggest mistake. But you were never a mistake. You were my miracle, and everything good in my life came from you. The tears fell freely now. I did not try to stop them. Be strong, my darling, be smart, and when the darkness comes, remember, you are a Pembroke. You come from people who survive. All my love, forever and always. Mom. I sat on the floor of the secret room and cried. For the first time since my grandfather's funeral, I let myself truly grieve. Not just for him, for my mother, for my father, for the family I had lost and the years I had spent not understanding why, but also for the family that had protected me, across decades, across death itself. My grandfather had kept this letter safe for 16 years, waiting for me to find it, waiting for me to be ready. My mother had loved me enough to warn me with her dying breath. My father had trusted his family to seek justice even after he was gone. 3 generations of Pembrokes, fighting for me, protecting me, loving me in ways I was only beginning to understand. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom in Hartford and watched Gerald Hale stand trial for murder. State of Connecticut versus Gerald Raymond Hale. Murder in the first degree. The courtroom was packed. Media filled the gallery. Cameras waited outside. The evidence was overwhelming. Frank DeLuca, the mechanic, testified for 3 days. He described every detail, how Gerald had approached him, how much he had paid, how the brakes had been sabotaged. His voice was steady, the voice of a man who had carried guilt for 20 years and was finally setting it down. Victoria testified for 2 days. She played the recordings she had made. Gerald's own voice, slurred with alcohol, confessing to everything. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as the words filled the air. Murder described like a business transaction. A life ended because it was inconvenient. The documentary evidence from my grandfather's secret room filled 6 evidence boxes: phone records, financial statements, photographs, 20 years of investigation, meticulous and thorough, finally seeing the light of day. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty, first-degree murder. Gerald showed no emotion when the verdict was read. He stared straight ahead, his jaw set, his eyes empty. The mask he had worn for decades had finally cracked, and there was nothing underneath. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. 25 years to life, no possibility of parole for 20 years. Gerald Hale would die in prison. Everyone knew it, including him. When the judge pronounced the sentence, I felt my grandfather's presence beside me. Not literally, I do not believe in ghosts. But I felt his satisfaction, his relief. 20 years he had waited for this moment. 20 years of gathering evidence, building walls, preparing for a battle he knew he would not live to see. Now it was finished. As they led Gerald away in handcuffs, he turned and looked at me. Not with hatred, not with rage, with something worse, recognition. He finally understood who had beaten him. Not a court, not a prosecutor, not even the evidence. A family, 3 generations of Pembrokes who refused to let him win. Victoria left Connecticut after the trial. She testified against her father in exchange for immunity, and then she disappeared. Last I heard, she was in California. New city, new name, new life. We do not speak. But we do not hate each other either. Some wounds are too deep for friendship. Some debts are too complicated for forgiveness. But there is something between us now. An acknowledgement, a truce. 2 women who survived the same monster. Diane's divorce was finalized before the trial ended. She cooperated with investigators to save herself. No charges were filed, but no sympathy was offered either. She sold the Greenwich mansion, took whatever money Gerald had not hidden, and moved somewhere warm. I have no idea where. I do not care. The trust distribution was completed 6 weeks after the verdict. Hawthorne Trust Company handled everything with the same quiet professionalism they had displayed since the beginning. The castle was finally fully mine. No conditions, no waiting until 35. The court recognized the extraordinary circumstances and approved an early transfer. My grandfather's final wish. His granddaughter protected. His legacy preserved. I spent 3 months restoring the castle, not changing it, honoring it. The gazebo where Victoria and I had met was rebuilt. The gardens were replanted. The secret room was preserved exactly as my grandfather had left it. A memorial to his vigilance. A reminder of what patience and documentation can accomplish. But I did not want the castle to be just a monument to the past. I wanted it to be something more. I opened part of the estate to the community, educational programs for local schools, historical preservation events, summer camps for children from difficult family situations. I called it Pembroke House, a place where broken families could find healing, where children who felt alone could discover they were not. In the main hall, I created a gallery. 5 photographs, arranged in chronological order. My great-great-grandfather, who built the castle. A stern man with kind eyes, standing before the construction site in 1892. My great-grandfather, who preserved it. Pictured with his wife and children on the front steps, 1923. My grandfather, who protected it. Sitting in his study surrounded by books, the photograph taken on his 80th birthday. My father, who should have inherited it. Young and smiling, standing beside the blue BMW he loved, unaware of what was coming. My mother, who loved me enough to warn me. Her wedding photograph, radiant and hopeful, before everything went wrong. And at the end of the row, a space, empty for now, waiting. For me. For whoever comes after me. For the continuation of a story that refuses to end. Every morning I walk through the gallery. I touch each photograph, a silent conversation with the dead. I am still here, I tell them. I made it. The night before the first Pembroke House program launched, I stood in the gallery alone. Moonlight streamed through the windows, illuminating 5 generations of faces. I thought about everything they had given me. Not just money or property. Something more valuable. They gave me proof. Proof that documents matter. Proof that patience defeats rage. Proof that love can outlast death if you write it down. People ask me what I learned from everything that happened. They expect me to talk about revenge, about justice, about making enemies pay. But that is not the lesson. The lesson is simpler and harder. When people try to erase you, they use stories, lies, accusations, fabricated evidence. They count on you to fight back with emotion, with anger, with chaos. Do not fight back with records, with documents, with patience. Courts do not reward the loudest voice. Courts reward the clearest proof. My grandfather understood that. he spent 20 years building a fortress of paper. And when the storm came, that fortress held. I used to think inheritance meant money, property, things you could count and measure and spend. Now I know better. The real inheritance is wisdom. It is the knowledge passed from one generation to the next. It is the understanding that truth, carefully documented and patiently preserved, will always outlast lies. My grandfather gave me a castle, but more than that, he gave me a blueprint for survival. And that is worth more than any building could ever be. If you have ever felt alone against people who wanted to take what was yours, if you have ever wondered whether justice was possible, or just a story we tell ourselves to feel better, I want you to know something. You are not alone, and justice is real. It just takes patience. What would you have done in my place? Would you have fought or walked away? Would you have trusted the documents, or given up when the lies seemed overwhelming? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that the truth always finds a way, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories like this. Stories about ordinary people who refused to be erased. Stories about families who fought back with proof instead of anger. Because stories like this are not just entertainment. They are evidence. Evidence that even against impossible odds, even after 20 years of silence, the truth can still win. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying until the end. I will see you in the next one. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect